Okay, so welcome to our webinar on dealing with a defiant child, how to overcome opposition, backtalk, and resistance using democratic parenting methods. On this webinar, you're going to learn why kids get defiant or oppositional, communication skills that trigger a child's subconscious desire to cooperate. You'll also learn when and when not to use consequences and the difference between natural consequences and coercive consequences. And you'll learn how to set up effective family meetings. Also, we'll discuss 4 democratic parenting methods to deal with defiance without using punishments, threats, bribes, or rewards, and much more. So first off, who am I? I'm Dr. Blaise Ryan. I'm a doctor of Chinese medicine. And so that means that I was trained to look at the root cause of disease, not just the symptoms. And when I became a parent myself, my training led me to question the standard approaches to raising children, from the old school authoritarianism approach to the modern day permissiveness. And when I looked at these two polarities of approaches around parenting, neither really rang true to me. And I asked myself, might there not be an easier way, a less stressful way for both myself as a parent and also for my child? And so I started doing a lot of research, and that led me to founding Child Brain Health and eventually the Parent Learning Club, which is an online membership program to educate parents on democratic parenting methods. And I'm the author of Democratic Parenting. And Democratic Parenting is the book which pretty much coalesces the majority of the research over the years on child development, child behavior, and child psychology. And so today we're going to talk specifically about defiance, and we have a lot of information to cover here, so I'm going to talk pretty quickly, and then there's a few parts that are more interactive in this webinar, and then after the main presentation we'll get into answering some of your specific questions. I'll open the chat box and everyone can ask away. So if you have any specific questions about your child, save them for now. I won't be able to look at them right now, and at the end of the main presentation, as we go through the main material, we'll get a chance to address your question personally. So until then, if there's any audio issues or anything like that, just pipe up and let me know in the chat box, and we'll get started. So where do we start here? Let's start at the problem. The problem that we're talking about is child defiance or opposition, or sometimes children even get the diagnosis of being ODD, which stands for oppositional defiant disorder, meaning that the children are overly oppositional and defiant on an ongoing basis. Also backtalk, or any types of resistance, or stubborn, willful, or uncooperative behaviors, or general disrespect that we can see in children. So where do we go to solve these problems? Well, my approach, which I think largely comes from my training in Chinese medicine, is to look at the root cause behind any problem in order to create effective long-term permanent change, rather than just trying to focus on the symptoms. I like to go at the root. So to explain this and for us to really get a good view of what's happening here and why children misbehave, I use the model of the roots and the fruits. And if you've seen some of my other webinars or if you've read the book Democratic Parenting, you're probably familiar with this. So the fruits refer to the symptoms, the behaviors, the things that we see, the actual problems, or the results that we experience in our lives and in our relationships. The roots are the reasons and the causes for those symptoms, behaviors, problems, and results. They're also the motivations behind certain behaviors. So, if we have certain, like if we have an apple tree, this is the analogy I often give. If you have an apple tree growing in your backyard and it starts to produce rotten fruit, so and you ask your neighbor, you say, my apple tree is producing these rotten fruit. Do you have any advice? And they say, yeah, the grocery store has a sale right now on apples, and they have these beautiful red shiny apples. You can get a bushel for $10, and just go there, buy a couple of bushels, and then take all the rotten ones off your tree, tape all the other ones up, and then you'll have an apple tree with beautiful shiny red apples, and problem solved. Well, that's looking at it from the perspective of fixing the symptoms, or focusing solely on the behaviors, trying to fix the problem on the fruit level. But the reason why the tree would be producing these rotten fruits is the root, right? The reason underneath the root. So the soil might be lacking some nutrients, some minerals, or there might be an infestation of some kind that is affecting the tree, or maybe they're not getting enough water. Maybe the tree's not getting enough water. So those underlying reasons are the root cause. And if we address those with our fruit tree, then we can help our tree produce healthy, delicious red fruit by itself, right? Rather than us trying to fix a problem on a purely symptomatic level. So that's the approach that we want to take when dealing with our children's behavior. So in this case, the fruit, again, that we're dealing with, the problems that we just outlined, are the defiance and the opposition and this type of thing. So what's the root to this type of behavior? Why do kids act in defiant ways or become oppositional? So there are three main reasons. And again, if you have my book, Democratic Parenting, you're familiar with these. And it's very important for us to go over this again and again so that we can really understand how to affect a total transformation on the side of our child's behavior so that they become more cooperative and less resistant. So the first reason that a child will misbehave in any way, in this case we're talking about defiance, are legitimate unmet needs. So, we can talk, there's 15 main needs that I've isolated in my research, essential childhood needs, and these are reflected on basically three levels: the physical needs, our social needs, and our mental needs. And there's way too much information to go into right here in this webinar, so I'm just going to skim the surface of these needs. And actually in May I'll be doing a webinar to specifically on these childhood needs, and we'll go into each one of these 15 ones and explore them and see how we can meet them using a variety of different techniques and methods and activities. But for right now, it's important for us to look at the main needs that are associated with children who act defiant or oppositional. So what I've seen again and again are with children who act this way is that oftentimes these are the needs that are missing: the need for autonomy, the need for information, the need for processing, and that's processing experiences, processing emotions or feelings, the need for attention. Some children who just need extra attention will sometimes act out in really oppositional ways in order for them to get that attention. And this follows that age-old saying where bad attention is better than no attention at all, explaining why children will sometimes act naughty. Also, the need for contribution can go unmet and then cause a child to become defiant. So the need for contribution here refers to the natural desire that we all have deep inside for us to feel like we're contributing socially to those who we're connected with, whether it's the family, whether it's our class, or whether we're grown up and adults and we're contributing to the area in which we work or our community or the world at large. So this is a deep-seated psychological need that we all have, is to feel like our actions have meaning. And that's where this need for contribution comes in. And all these needs are actually oftentimes much easier to meet for our children than we think. And using these democratic parenting methods, you'll see how that we can meet these needs in a variety of different ways. But the thing is that they often just go overlooked. And and we all just live such busy lifestyles nowadays that we can just get easily wrapped up in our own pressures and our demands of stress of daily life and responsibilities, where we can just sometimes these needs can go unmet for a little bit too long, and we can forget a little bit or just not be aware of the importance of meeting these needs for our children. And then our children will try to let us know through the only means that they know how, which is oftentimes just resisting us and defying us and being more oppositional or talking back to us. And that's really their way to let us know that there are some needs of theirs that are not being met. The thing is that even as you've probably experienced in your own life, in your own relationships, whether it's those with your spouse or intimate partners or friends or other family members, or even sometimes in your work with your boss or other colleagues, as grown adults listening to this with children of your own, you've probably experienced time and time again where you have a hard enough time discerning what needs of yours are missing. And even more so, trying to communicate these needs that you may have to others in your life. Like I said, people in your work or family or your spouse, relationships that you have with others. Oftentimes as adults, we have a hard enough time trying to communicate that we might need something, let alone have the clarity to know what it is we need. So we can definitely be empathetic from that perspective of how challenging and difficult it can be for our children to try to express to us, the parents and the adults, what needs they might be lacking. Okay, so it's really important just to keep that in mind, that when our child do act defiant, oftentimes they're trying to tell us that they're missing something. They have these unmet needs that are missing. So that's just one of the 3 reasons that children will act defiant or misbehave is unmet needs. The next one that we will discuss are role models. Okay, now children are natural-born mimics. That's how they learn how to walk and talk and relate to the world and respond to challenges in life, through modeling the adults and the other role models in their lives and their environment, and watching how they respond and how they act and how they talk. So there's a few different types of role models that children have. The primary one are the parents, of course. And then we have siblings and other family members. And then as we step outside the family circle, we have peers and friends and other adults like teachers or people in the community. And finally, we step outside the realm of actual person-to-person interaction, and even characters in books and stories on TV or in movies or even in video games. All these characters can influence our children and act as role models for types of behavior. And then also different toys as well are ways where children can pick up different ways of being and acting in the world. So we can see immediately that a lot of if our children are watching The Simpsons, for example, and they're having Bart Simpson as a role model, we can see how a child might start to act defiant or oppositional because of seeing that role model on TV. And the next reason why children will misbehave or become defiant is stress. Okay, and a lot of people, sometimes they don't give stress its due for affecting children, but nowadays more than ever before, our children are put under a lot of stress and pressure to keep up with a very fast-paced world that is centered more around adults much more than children. And children grow up in a world where they have very little power and very little autonomy. And they're kind of forced along these very busy schedules with very little time to process their experiences and just relax and be, because oftentimes in the modern world, there's a large emphasis on doing and accomplishing and learning and just doing more and more and more. And this can just build up stress and pressure, and doesn't oftentimes give children the opportunity to process perhaps hurts, whether those are actual physical hurts or more emotional hurts that can happen in life through disappointments or physical things. So, we can talk about the hormonal effects of stress and how this affects the brain. There's different stress hormones that happen when a child gets stressed. There's cortisol, which affects the learning and the memory. It even affects blood sugar, the immune system, and it affects the whole health of the body. We also have neuroepinephrine, adrenaline, which is released during stress. And this also affects attention and response and affects the body in many different ways. So I'm just mentioning these so that you can understand the importance of reducing stress in your child's life and also assisting them to heal from stress or hurts that they haven't had a chance to process yet, because it's very beneficial and it can really help them to get back on track around their behavior. Otherwise, these stress hormones, actually are toxic to the brain cells and really cloud their ability to process information, to be receptive, and to be more cooperative and present, because their body is almost being held hijacked by these stress hormones. So the psychology behind why children get stressed, we have to understand the development of the human child, where they are dependent on their parents for a much longer period than any other animal on Earth. And their survival is 100% dependent on us. So anything that threatens their sense of connection with their caregiver, whether it's their parent or someone else, will trigger their instinctive fight or flight drive for survival. So that means that children feel stress anytime they experience the feelings of disconnection. So this can be through criticism, through isolation, or even confusion, which causes them to feel incredibly disconnected to their environment, to reality, and to what's happening around them. So whenever they experience criticism, isolation, or confusion, we can know that there's a disconnect and their stress response will begin. Whether it's a severe stress response, which causes a lot of hormones to get released and really affects their thinking and their presence, or whether it's just a minor one, will obviously depend circumstance to circumstance, but we need to keep this in mind. So there are 4 causes of childhood stress. First, we have aggressive stress, and this is tangible pain or the fear of pain. So this is referring to, hitting, violence, spanking, shaking, yelling, scolding, abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual, or any kind of trauma. These are all aggressive stressors. Then we have passive stress. Okay, passive stress is the pressure of unmet needs. Okay, we just talked about the first reason why children will act in difficult ways or become defiant is because of legitimate unmet needs. So if these go on for too long, that these needs are unmet, then passive stress will begin to build. So here we're talking about over or under stimulation, poor health, no clear limits or boundaries or direction, broken sense of connection, or prolonged lack of affection, attention, or any other need. As well as we have situational stress. Now, these are challenges that are beyond our control. Life changes or situations that are really nobody's fault, like natural disasters, divorce, parental separation, hearing about wars or disasters in the news, disease, death, or illness of a family member, or even a pet can be stressful for a child. And this is a type of situational stress here. Moving houses, change of schools, those are all major stressors for children, and they're classified under what we call situational stress. Finally, we have birth stress. So these are problems that occur before, during, or after birth. And this is fetal or maternal distress, prolonged labor, traumatic births, early infancy trauma, or medication, surgery, birthing, mechanical birthing aids, these types of things. Okay, so this can cause a very real physical and emotional and psychological stress on the very early infant child. Okay, so these are the 4 main causes of childhood stress. All right, and then we have the 3 main underlying reasons for defiance. We have distress, we have role modeling, the example that they see in the world around them. So, for example, if one parent is often very resistant to the other parent's ideas or their lead, then the child will see this behavior and that they'll tend to model it as well. And again, legitimate unmet needs, which we discussed, the need for autonomy, the need for attention, and some of the other needs that we discussed earlier, and we'll actually get a lot more deep into these needs as we continue through this webinar. So the important thing to remember when we're dealing with resistance or defiance is that children tend to be more resistant to how things are happening more than what is actually happening. And this is slightly counterintuitive because they may be complaining about the what, right? They're saying like, I don't want to do this or I don't want to do that, so they're actually talking about the what. But the actual crux of their resistance stems from how they're being engaged in whatever's happening. Okay, and this is really key to understanding how we can shift the defiance without using, the punishments or rewards or bribes, but more connecting with them. And democratic parenting offers a new way to engage your child through meeting their needs, through maintaining a connection, and through modeling the example that you want them to mimic. So we have 14 main methods of democratic parenting, which are explained in great detail in my book. There's a chapter on each one. But in this webinar, we're going to talk specifically about 4 methods that are very good for dealing with defiance, especially when it's happening. The first one is connective communication. The next one is limit setting. And then we're going to talk about family meetings and natural consequences. So let's talk about connective communication first. So how does this work? So connective communication uses verbal and body language to connect to your child's heart and to make them feel connected, cared for, and loved. So the benefits of using connective communication is that it puts the child in a more responsive, open, and cooperative state because it builds a deep sense of trust and empathy and respect and a deep understanding where they feel that they're being understood and really cared for. And that will cause them in turn to be more open and more caring towards you. So connective communication meets these essential childhood needs. Okay, we talked about the unmet needs before. So these are the main ones that are met through this method. The need for connection, right? Because when we're using this type of communication, the main focus is on using our body and our verbal language to either reach through disconnects when there's a broken connection or to strengthen the connection we already have, right? Or to engage a connection that might be missing, okay? So it helps to meet that need for connection, which is one of the most important needs that children have. It also meets their need for affection. And here specifically we're talking about verbal affection, right? Because we can really give a lot of affection just in the words we use or the tone of the voice that we use when we're relating with someone. Also, the need for attention, because you'll see that as we go into the actual methods of using this communication technique, we communicate to the child that we're really present with them, that we're really giving them our attention, and that we're really there with them. Also, it meets the need for encouragement in the way that we talk and the words we use. We're encouraging our child, right? So then again they become less resistant because it increases that need for their ability to have autonomy and to feel inspired about what's happening. It also meets their need for information. We talked about before how the need for information is often a big missing need for children who are becoming defiant, is that they simply haven't been communicated to in a way where they fully grasp the reason why certain things are happening, right? Again, it's not so much that they're resisting what is happening, but how they're being engaged in what's happening. So by giving them the information about the needs behind what's happening, or the reasons or your rationales, or why you're doing what you're doing, the importance of it, whether it's chores or whether it's getting out the door in the morning on time, or whether it's getting to bed in time, or whether it's doing anything and your child's giving you a hard time, is to use the connective communication in a way to give them the information they need to feel much better about what's happening, to feel more engaged, to feel that they're more a part of what's happening rather than just being dragged along, kicking and screaming. And it also meets their need for consistency. Okay, so children have a big need for consistency in all areas of their life, and oftentimes it's the inconsistencies that we show children that will cause them to lose respect for limits and boundaries, and even what we say if we're not consistent in how we talk and how we deliver information, how we engage children. They'll start to become inconsistent in their level of cooperation as well. So by using connective communication, it really creates a strong foundation of relationship and connection, and it meets all these needs listed here. So there's two ways that we communicate. The first one is we use verbal language. Now that's referring to the words that you use. Also, we're referring to the tone of your voice when you're talking. Okay? And then the other way we communicate is through body language. This refers to posture and positioning, and positioning means how you position yourself in relation to the other person, whether you're facing them, whether you're angled, whether you go down on your knees with a child in order to be at eye level with them, whether you bend over, so it's basically how you position the space between you and the child. And posture obviously refers to whether your arms are crossed or your chin is up. There's lots of different indicators in posture of that we can use in order to communicate different things. And a lot of these are often communicated in a subconscious level, which everyone, I think, really picks up. Even though we might not be conscious of these types of body language cues, if we haven't studied them or become aware of them consciously, I think subconsciously we often pick up, or we get a certain vibe that comes through these types of body language. And it also refers to touch, okay? Touching a child on the shoulder, a gentle touch, or on their cheek, or touching the side of their head at just the right time can do a world of good to meet their need for connection and affection and attention, and just to let them know that we're really there, and to help break through resistance or barriers that can come up. And eye contact, that's another key one, a very important way that we can connect with our child in using body language. So now we're going to talk about what I call magic connective phrases and words. And these are different ways of talking and using different words which are extremely effective to connect with the child. I call them magical because of how effective they are. We're really they're using different triggers on the child's subconscious to really engage them and to make them feel more a part of the engagement, to help meet their needs for contribution and connection, simply by choosing the words in how we talk here. So the first one is using terms of endearment. So this refers to using words like sweetie or sweetheart, sugar plum, darling, bumbleberry, any kind of sweet term of endearment that you might already have a pet one for your child, but anything like that kind of helps to reach through any resistance or pressure or stress of the moment when you're butting heads with your child or engaged in a power struggle, is to kind of go beyond that and to try and to connect with their heart again. So here by using this type of term, you're kind of almost giving them a peace offering, and you're communicating to them that you're trying to connect deeper to their heart, and that you love them, and that's the place that you want to have the communication from, is that place of love, of deep heart connection. The other magic words or phrase is to use words that when we need to say no, to try and to avoid actually saying no, to use an alternative to no. Now, there's nothing wrong with saying no, but what I've found again and again, parents who use no all the time, is that it really loses its power. If you have to keep saying no and your child still defies you, even when you're saying no, then the word no has become impotent for you with your child. They have no respect for that word. So by using alternatives to no, you can save the word no for when it's really important, so that rather than saying it again and again and again, to the point that it loses all meaning and strength, we just want to use it when we have to, and then our child won't question it, because they know that when we say no, it's no, that there's no going around it. And so ways that we can do that is use not right now, perhaps another time, I'm afraid not, we're going to have to pass this time, maybe later, we'll talk about it, right? So if your child says, can I have an ice cream, I want this ice cream, or I want this toy, rather than saying no, 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 or if they're reaching for something which is not good, if a toddler is trying to get something, and it's getting them into trouble, they shouldn't be going where they're going, we can just gently guide them away, say, not right now, sweetie, maybe there's something else over here that might be more interesting for you. Any type of words that we can use to try and guide them away in a different, more gentle direction, rather than just saying no. And another reason to do this is that there's a study done, I think it says in Democratic Parenting, I might have the actual stats of this study, I can't remember it right now, but it compared the amount of times a child hears the word no versus the word yes in a day, and I think it was like 5 or even 10 times more often they hear the word no throughout the day. And because children are at the stage where their whole worldview is just being formed, and they approach life from such a zestful, curious place. And I think a lot of their intelligence and their sweetness and their vitality comes from their natural-born curiosity and their desire to explore their world. But if we always have to shut them down by saying no, 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 and closing their curiosity in all directions, then it really puts a damper on their zest and on the sense that life is good and life is safe and that it's okay to explore and to expand our limits and to grow. So my approach is to really help foster that natural-born curiosity and that desire to learn and to explore, and the drive to challenge the limitations and to strive beyond those to achieve new things. Those are the types of things I want to foster in my child. So rather than saying no, I try to just use something a bit softer to guide them in a different direction. Another way you can speak to your child is by enrolling them into community thinking. So to do this, we use words such as we, us, our, together, and this inspires a sense of togetherness. Rather than using words like you, me, I, we talk about us and we. So when it's time to go to bed or to do such a thing, we can explain to our child that that's how we do things, that we work together so that we can get everything done, and that we can enjoy a nice evening together and have time to read a nice book, and get up in the morning and we'll all be nicely rested. Rather than saying you need to go to bed so that you get enough sleep and so that in the morning you're not tired, right? Rather than pointing the finger at them, to talk about everything from a sense of togetherness. And the reason to do this is not to try and brainwash your child and create a communism mindset and to manipulate them from like a Borg kind of situation, but more we want to inspire that sense of contribution to make them really feel a part of the family. And you'll see when we use this along with some of the other methods of democratic parenting, like the family meetings, we give them a complete open platform to challenge and question any of the rules or limits or any of the routines that we have in place, so that we can develop new ways of doing things together, right, that meet everyone's needs, and so it's a win-win for everyone. So we just want to use language and talk in the type of way and choose the words that really inspire that sense of togetherness rather than that sense of separativeness, right? So it's really us in this together rather than you against me, okay? Rather than struggling will against will and power struggles, we say that together we are more powerful, and we're going to find a way to work through this together so that we're all happy, so that we're all fulfilled, and so that all of us feel that our needs are met together, okay? The other way to talk is to use a technique of acknowledging, encouraging, and then expounding upon what is said. So an example of using this is to say something like, that's a great idea, and I think, or yes, I love that idea, let's, and then you go on. So what this means is that when your child says something, and they present a really good idea, even though you think, okay, that's not such a great idea, or that idea is not going to work at all, or in the least, is to at least acknowledge their idea and then encourage them to continue sharing their ideas and to continue thinking about new ways and new solutions to do things. Okay, what we want to do is to acknowledge and to encourage and then expound, which means to take what they've said and then take it to a place that using your wisdom and perspective as the adult and the parent towards a place that's going to work better for everybody. Okay, so an example of using this is that is that the child is so you have a family meeting with the child who's being very defiant about going to bed on time, and then you ask the child, okay, what could we do to make the routine before bedtime easier so that you won't always put up a big fuss when it's time to put on your pajamas? And they say, well, maybe if you let me play a half hour of video games then I'll be happy and I'll put on my pajamas without a fuss. Okay, so you know that won't work for several reasons. One, that they're probably, after half an hour, they're going to beg and plead for an extra 5 minutes or for a little longer, and then it's just going to be another big fuss. And the other thing too is that we know from just research that that this type of technological stimulation before bed isn't really good for their mental development and for their academic performance either. So we don't want to succumb to this idea, but we don't want to put a damper on that. What we want to do is to encourage communication, to encourage the contribution, right? So what we want to do is to acknowledge that and then to encourage that, because to them that is a great idea, right? That is a good idea to them. So just because we have a different perspective, a wiser perspective, a more mature perspective, a more situational perspective, we can't use that against them. So we can acknowledge that. We say, that's a great idea, sweetheart, and then you say, the only thing is I think that may not work for us because of, we won't have enough time. Still, what we need to do is to reduce the amount of activities before bed so that we're in bed at an early time and we can have more time to read. And then in the morning, we'll be rested and we'll be able to approach the new day with more ease. So you see how there I encouraged them by saying that's a good idea, by saying something positive about what they said, and then I expounded upon it. I took it from there, right? And then told them why that might not work, and then I presented them with trying to open the door to deeper discussion. Okay, and then another way, the fifth way, is to let them know that you're present and that you're connected to them. And this is extremely powerful, especially when your child is struggling with strong feelings or emotions. Okay, and oftentimes these strong feelings and emotions can come up when a child's being resistant or defiant or oppositional. Oftentimes these behaviors are just a precursor to a big freak out or a temper tantrum, right? So what we want to do is to let them know that we're there, that we're connected, that we're giving them our attention, that we're present with them, that we're not texting or not on our Facebook, on our computer, that we're not busy with dinner, that we're not trying to get a little bit of work done, that we're not cleaning up, that we're really there with them. So it's by communicating things like, I'm right here with you. I see you, sweetheart. I hear you, right? And these types of words are extremely effective to trigger your child's subconscious desire to cooperate. And the way that's done is because it makes them feel really connected. It makes them feel acknowledged, makes them feel respected, so it increases their trust and their sense of connection with you. So all these words and these examples you see on these pages, you can use these. You can try them out, and you'll see how well they actually work for you. And these are all in the Democratic Parenting book under the chapter of connective communication, so you can get them there as well. So let's talk about how to use connective communication with defiance. So think of a child's defiance and opposition kind of like fire and earth. Okay, the fire is the oppositional side, the back-talking or the more aggressive and explosive behaviors that often come with defiance. And the earth is more the kind of unmovable, like a mountain aspect of the defiance, the stubborn or the difficult, the hard to work with, the uncooperative or the strong-willed, right? Kind of like a hard earth. And if we look at the elements here, we can see that the water will subdue fire. Also, water turns hard, resistant, difficult earth into nourishing soil. So we want to be like water in our communication. Soft, adaptable, fluid, loving, nourishing, soothing, healing, flowing, not holding on to anything, not getting attached to the behavior, but flowing deeper to that, to nourish, to connect with the heart underneath. So water will always overcome fire and earth, but its power, the power of water, is in its patience and its persistence, not in its stubbornness and nor in its force, because these are attributes to earth and to fire. So what happens, though, when you scold or raise your voice or lose it on your defiant child? What happens when you freak out on your child? You spank them or yell at them or punish them? What happens then? Well, basically, you're adding fire to fire. Okay, so let's take a look at how we can use connected communication in dealing with defiance. What I'm going to do now is take a live example. So the first person who pipes up with an example of defiance right now, I'm going to bring them on. Just put up your hand or say something on here, and what I'll do is I'll unmute your microphone, and then you can give us an example of defiance that you're dealing with your child, and I'll show you how we can use this method of connected communication with that. So if anyone has an example, just there's a little button there on your application that has a hand. You can raise your hand, or you can just put something in the chat box, and then I'll call you out and see if you're available to join us using your microphone. Hello?
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you doing? Where are you calling in from?
I'm calling from Perth, Australia.
From Perth, Australia. Wow, that's great. So tell us about the situation that you had in mind around defiance.
I think this would be relevant. I've got numerous ones at the moment. I'm dealing with an 11-year-old boy, almost 12, and it's the defiance, I suppose. One of the situations would be with his younger brother, his 6-year-old. I mean, they're very loving kids, but he does tend to pick on him a fair bit, as brothers do. And when I ask him to stop, he tends to just push it that little bit further, you know, and it tends to wind his 6-year-old brother up. So he doesn't tend to stop when I ask him to stop.
Okay. Okay, great. So so there's a couple of things we can approach. So first off, we looked at in the webinar, we talked about the 3 main reasons of legitimate unmet needs, role modeling, and stress. Do you think which of these 3 do you think are at play in this situation?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's not an easy one. It sounds like just from a little bit you shared, there might be some the biggest unmet need I see there might be the need for information, just in kind of just understanding the importance of that a little bit more. The need for there might be a need for connection a little bit more in terms of connected with his brother, so he feels a bit more empathetic with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, there could be other things as well. It's hard to know with this little information, but that's something.
Sure.
I definitely recommend you spend a little bit of time to look at those 3 reasons. Again, the one is legitimate unmet needs, role modeling, and it could very well that maybe he's being wound up by someone in his school or a friend or someone in his.
Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I wonder if it might be stress, purely because I think my husband and I, I feel like we're sort of going through a situation at the moment where we both feel like we've maybe given them too much, and then we sort of put, we feel like he's coming into himself now, and perhaps we're being too heavy on him, so we're trying to stand back a little bit, like to just let him breathe a little bit. I think maybe we stress him a bit that way. We're coming down on him too hard, too quickly. And not letting him express himself, perhaps.
Great. Wow, that's great awareness right there.
Yeah, we've just had a really big situation last week. I don't want to take too much of your time, but we had a really big situation last week where, I'm trying all this, sort of passive parenting, because obviously my husband is working full-time and I'm with the kids more, and we were trying to do his homework, and he was saying, I was trying to get him to be more responsible for himself because he goes to high school next year. So I was sitting with him and just saying, I'm not going to write it for you, but I'm here to help you. And his expectation was for me to sort of put the words into his mouth, and it blew up into this big, crazy, I lost the plot with him, and I completely lost the plot. And, and it was just awful. But we came together afterwards. He actually went to a friend's house for a night because I just was so furious. And he couldn't deal with me, so we had to separate. And then we've come back together as a family. On Sunday we sat down as a family and had a meeting, and it tended to, we spoke about it, and I did a lot of the things that you've said in here, and my husband as well backed me up, and it seems to, touch wood, be a lot better now. And this is why I took on this, I wanted to do this live webinar with you, because I really connected with what you had to say.
Oh, that's great, great. Well, that's wonderful. That's sounds like you made a lot of progress on Sunday with them.
I hope so, but it feels like, you know, sometimes it's one step forward, two steps back, but we're working on it. It's a work in progress.
Good, good. Well, that's the thing is, like, you know, the wonderful thing about children is they'll always let us know where we're at in the moment. So, you know, they're very much in the moment, and they don't, like, you know, they don't fake moods. As we grow up and be adults, we kind of, you know, even though we're not feeling well, we'll often tell people, I'm fine, I'm fine. You know, children will tend to hold their feelings on their sleeves a lot more, especially they'll let us know as parents. And sometimes it's in very passive ways, you know, almost passive-aggressive, by just being defiant and resistant or acting out towards their other siblings. But that's their way of trying to communicate that there's something wrong, that either there's needs that are unmet, or maybe they're feeling too stressed or too much pressure, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think what my husband and I have realised is that it's how we react, is where it goes. You know, whereas before to us it was his behaviour, and now we're realising that we actually need to change the way we do it, because it wasn't working. And we were putting the onus on him when I think it actually comes back to us.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a wonderful awareness. Wow, way to go, Emma. That's really awesome. That's really awesome.
Thank you. It's just hard work, though, isn't it?
It's really hard work, right? That's why I often call this type of parenting is the ultimate self-help program or self-development program.
Definitely, definitely.
Because no one will hold you more accountable than your children, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for sharing that, Emma.
Thank you, Blaise.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so that was a great example by Emma about dealing with this defiance. And I'm just going to say a few things about that specific situation and how we can use connective communication to help her son deal with his other son. So you know, we're going to talk about using the other methods of family meetings, and I think that would be particularly effective in this case to help the two boys feel more connected together, and for them to help to really express their feelings. But you can see that Emma already did a lot of the big work in terms of figuring out the underlying reasons for his son's challenging behavior. And the big one, which she realized, is that she was probably putting a little bit too much pressure on him. And then by seeing that and by empathizing, and also by realizing that they are the primary role models and that they need to emulate the type of communication that they want to see from their son, that's what they have to do, right? They have to be the role model for that loving, connective communication. And the more that they communicate with him in that way, the more that he will model that towards his brother. As well, right? Because children will model the way we communicate to them, being their primary role models. So, you know, just using that example too that Emma gave around, you know, trying to help encourage him doing his homework and meeting that resistance and stuff like that. That's a great example of how we can really approach our relationships with our children differently and focus more around the connection. And that's why it's called connective communication, because the primary goal is the connection and to enhance that sense of connection. And again, it's much less about the what, right? Like, you know, the teaching our children how to, the children learning all the stuff they learn from their homework in their school, that's very secondary in importance to the sense of connection, the sense of encouragement, you know, that sense of support that they get from us as parents when we help them with their homework, okay? So so when we encounter these types of issues, and when we feel that though our child's trying to manipulate us into kind of enabling them to kind of get around doing the work, what we have to do is to start to get more creative into deepening the conversation, deepening the interaction. So rather than just throwing up our defenses and getting, you know, losing our patience with our child. We want to keep that focus on being like water. Okay, remember our child might be, by trying to use that earth and the fire, we just want to be water again. And the water is, we got to think like the ocean, incredibly deep. So, and incredibly powerful, unmovable to that point of how deep the ocean is. And so we just want to stay fluid when our child throws us something, to try and get us to trigger or react to something, and just to try and manipulate us to, maybe enable them to do the homework for them rather than for them to get through the challenge. We want to just try to open the conversation more. Again, we can use our words, the words we choose, the tone of our voice, again, trying to use a very empathic, loving tone of voice rather than showing any harshness or any impatience. And if we do show impatience, it's important for us to be honest with ourselves and our children that we're just being impatient with, it's not our child's fault that they're experiencing this block or having this issue. And us as parents, the best thing we can do is to help to find a creative solution through that. But when we get impatient, the tendency is to blame them for the problem. But that goes nowhere very fast because it's just pouring fuel onto the fire already. So instead, we want to be like water. We want to be fluid and to try and find an alternative way to open the conversation deeper, to find out where the problem really lies for a child, where the resistance is, where the challenge is, or how maybe we could help our child engage their interest or encourage them in a slightly different way around the homework or the problem that they're facing. So those are ways that we can use the connective communication with that specific type of situation. Another thing too is that we can kind of also, when the time is right, especially during the family meeting, which we'll get into just shortly here, we can communicate to the older child how the younger child might feel when they're being picked on or bugged and that type of thing. So again, just by opening the conversation and using what we call neutral phrases rather than blame phrases. And again, this part is explained in the Democratic Parenting book under the connective communication. How to use neutral phrases, which means that we're talking situationally, and rather than pointing a finger, we're just talking about the situation. So in this case, if we're talking to Emma's older son about the effects of him picking on his younger brother, rather than saying, when you do this to your brother, he feels like that, right? We can say something like, when your younger brother is being, teased like that, he gets really riled up and so and so. So rather than pointing the finger, even though they're the one doing it, they know that they're the one doing it, and by pointing the finger more, that just increases the sense of disconnection. It increases the sense of them against us, and it reduces that connection. So we want to increase that connection, which will open the door to cooperation and engagement. And the way to do that is to use more neutral phrases, to talk more situationally rather than focus on, and rather than to make the issue personal, right? And we see this all the time in in just interpersonal relationships, and with our husbands and our wives and our partners. Oftentimes we get so just caught up in a tiny little thing, and then we start to point the fingers and make that little thing personal when it's not personal at all. And then as soon as we make it personal, our relationship and our conversation and our connection goes downhill quick, right? But if we can approach issues and problems more situationally, more from a neutral perspective, then we can work together as a team to overcome it and find a win-win solution. Okay, great. So let's go on to the next method that we use for overcoming defiance and opposition using democratic parenting, and that's in setting limits. Okay, so here I call them loving limits. So how does this work? Sometimes we need to be flexible with our children, and we need to let them learn the natural consequences of their choices. But other times we need to be firm, and we need to set a limit. So a loving limit provides a firm boundary without being harsh or without hurting the child's feelings. So what are limits? And why are they important? Limits are the borders between appropriate and inappropriate behavior, conduct, and action. So limits, or the lack of limits, define the culture and the identity of the family, and thus they form the foundation of a child's identity. Okay, and that's very important to look at. And as you'll see from this quote by Stanley Greenspan, who's a clinical professor of psychiatry and behavioral science and pediatrics at the George Washington University, he said, "Setting limits gives your child something to define himself against. If you are able to set limits without being overly intrusive or controlling, you'll be providing him with a firm boundary against which he can test his own ideas." Okay? So this, I couldn't have said it better myself. This is why limits are so important and so vital to be able to set in without being overly intrusive or controlling. Okay? So that's what loving limits are all about. The thing is that kids are natural born limit testers. Okay? So we have to accept that. We have to accept that testing limits is what we all must do in order to grow. Okay? Because, you know, we can only grow beyond what we know. And what we know are the limits, right? Those are the boundaries. But if we want to grow and achieve something new, we must grow past that, okay, past that limit. So it's the same thing whether we're an athlete, we're trying to go beyond our physical limits, or whether we're in academic school, or whether we're trying to achieve some great thing. We push ourselves beyond our limits. So we need to test limits, and because children are entirely dependent on us, and they're basically under our rules, right? So their autonomy is strictly tied to us. They'll naturally test limits, okay, and they'll do so more than anyone else because they're in this stage of intense growth. You know, and in fact, testing limits is a positive sign that a child's willpower and their creative thinking capacities are properly developing. All right. So a child who never tests limits, we have to maybe look at where if their willpower is being stunted a little bit or being suppressed, or you know whether they're being you know, helicopter parented, or there's too much permissive parenting that's happening. All right. So what's the difference then between defiance and testing limits? Defiance, backtalk, and opposition can only take root in an environment where limits are not respected. All right? This is a big one to understand. So if you don't stick to your guns, your child will walk all over you. Or if you're too strict in your rules, your child will fight you. Okay? So here we have the two ends of the polarity. Okay? We have permissive parenting where we don't stick to our limits. We don't create an environment where we respect the limits, and our children therefore won't respect them, and they'll walk all over the limits, and they'll walk all over anything we say. Okay? But if we're too authoritarian, if we're too strict with our rules, then that will really inspire a child's rebellious nature, and they'll start to fight against us and really challenge us. So setting loving limits meets these essential childhood needs. It meets the need for connection. Okay, it does that because we show the child that we're so connected to what they need in order to grow, the proper boundaries for a nurturing environment, that they feel that strong connection is always there. And also the way that we set loving limits is that we want to create that strong boundary, but we never want to lose that sense of connection with the child's heart. We never want to use harshness in our tone or delivery unless absolutely necessary for someone's safety. But the point is that that's why they're called loving limits, is that we keep that connection, we keep that engagement on the emotional level where they feel connected. It also meets their need for security, because an environment where there are no set clear limits, a child can very easily get anxious because they don't know where the boundaries are, whether the boundaries of behavior or conduct or action. It also meets their need for affection. Okay, So it does that again because we can tell them again where the appropriate behavior is and where it's not. And then also the way that we deliver these loving limits, we use the connective communication and we embed the types of words, like terms of endearment and these types of things, so that we're communicating loving affection while setting a firm, unmovable limit. And that's really the balance of getting this right. It also meets their need for autonomy, because in order for them to be properly autonomous, they need to know what is appropriate and what is not. If we don't give them the proper limits in life, they won't be effectively autonomous, because their autonomy wasn't grounded in reality. It was so an example of this is households that are overly permissive, where children will walk all over them. From one perspective, that someone might think that child has a lot of autonomy because they rule the house, but the truth is that that autonomy won't carry them very far in life when they meet the quote unquote real world, and the world isn't as permissive as their parents are. So it helps them create more effective sense of autonomy. And then it also meets their need for information, to know exactly, again, where the boundaries are, what is okay and what is not. And it meets their need for consistency. And that's a really big one in setting loving limits, is that we need to be consistent with them in order for them to be effective. The moment that we're inconsistent is the moment that our limit loses all efficiency and potency. So how do we set loving limits in dealing with defiance? The key, like I said, is to be consistent. Okay? As soon as you let a child defy the limit that you set, the limit becomes useless. It becomes powerless. Okay? It's no longer meaningful the very moment you let the child defy it, okay, without reinforcing that limit. So the child will not respect the limit that you don't. And if you let the child defy the limit, you're telling them that you don't respect it, and therefore neither will they. So you have to treat your limits with impeccable respect, and only be flexible with them, only change them, only be willing to change those limits and alter them after proper family meetings and open communication. Okay? So I'm not saying, no matter what, stick to your guns and never be flexible with your limits. Not at all, right? That's not reality. That's not life. We need to keep life an open discussion so that it can continue to evolve. Okay, and we want to engender a strong sense of openness and respect in the entire family. So we want to create an environment where children can openly challenge limits and challenge rules and challenge routines in the family, and then we can discuss them through communication. And through that communication, through that discussion, we can really engender an ability to have really good judgment, to have a situational awareness when it comes to problem solving. It really helps to build team building skills, and relationship skills. And these are all the skills that come from this type of interaction. These meetings and communications are some of the most valuable skills in the modern world. Much more valuable than anything that you'll learn in school. This ability to communicate, to challenge, and to work together, and to overcome difficulties, and to find new and better ways to do things where everyone feels that their needs are met and everyone's winning. That's a very valuable skill in any environment. So that these are the main things we want to focus on when we're using limit setting with a child who's defiant. We need to be consistent, right? That's the most important thing, because when we're not, we're telling the child that this limit is useless. Okay, so that's why when oftentimes I guide parents away from saying no too often, because that can be so easily challenged, the word no, and the more that it's challenged, the more that it's defied, the less powerful the word no becomes over time. And then many parents will say that their child just doesn't listen to them no matter what, and that's a result of not being able to set very clear limits so that the child learns to respect those limits, and they will respect them if you do. Okay, and the way to do that is to really keep them at the level of impeccable respect. Be willing to discuss them, be willing to change them, be willing to be flexible with them, but only after open communication and a lot of thought. Okay, so let's take another example of using loving limits with defiance or opposition. If anyone out there has any questions around a situation, just click on the hand button there.
I'm here. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
Hi, Amanda. How you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Good, thank you. Where are you listening in from tonight?
Northern Virginia.
Northern Virginia, right on. Cool. Cool. So I saw you wrote a few questions in here, and we can talk about one of these, or if you have any other questions or specifically around your child's defiance or any issue around resistance or opposition, we can take a look at how to use loving limits with that.
Okay.
Can you think of any situation that that you're dealing with or a circumstance?
I think the hardest thing right now is we actually do have limits and we do have rules that the kids know about, and I think we're pretty consistent in enforcing them, and I try to be understanding, but they keep repeating the same behaviors over and over and over again, even when we set limits. So we're having trouble with getting them to comply.
Okay. Can you give me an example about a specific behavior?
I'm trying to think. Like if, say my child gets homework for the evening, and it's not a matter of the ability of whether they can do it. They're bright. It's more just, you know, we actually agree upon a time that they'll start the homework, and then you ask them to go and do the homework, and then they become very defiant, start crying and say no. It's really tough. It's come to the point where I've actually had to hire a tutor to actually teach my child because there's so much resistance with me in particular, and I'm trying to be very patient, and it's tough. It's really tough, and this comes from a student who's doing advanced academics, so I don't understand what I'm doing wrong.
Okay, so so whenever you're in there with your child and you're helping them with the transition to go into the time to do homework, they put up a big fuss. But when you have a tutor there, they're more compliant?
Yes, they're pleasant, friendly, smiling, do their homework in record speed, 1 hour versus 3. It's just amazing, and I feel like I'm very patient and I'm pretty loving, but I'm also firm when I need to be, so I'm confused.
Okay, well that's an interesting one. So while there could be a lot of reasons why, and again, the first thing we always want to look at is those 3 main reasons. If there's any legitimate unmet needs, if there's some role modeling, or if there's some stress that might have accumulated for them. Have you given that any thought, or is there any things that come straight to your mind around that?
Yeah, I think the child I'm referring to, without saying names or anything, it's just a first child, and I think sometimes needs more attention than it's possible at times. I try to do as many things as possible with them. I've been at home with them for 9+ years, so I feel like I've done a lot. But it doesn't ever seem to be enough.
Yeah, you said this is your older child?
This is my older child, yeah.
Yeah. How old are they? Is he?
10.
10. Is it a boy or girl?
Boy.
Boy. Okay, what's his name?
Drew.
Drew. Okay. Okay, yeah. So the need for attention, that could definitely be the case. It's very common for the older child to feel like they need a little bit more attention, because they often feel like the younger child took some of the attention that they had when they were the single child.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's yeah, and that could definitely be indicated by the fact that that when the tutor comes in, that he has no problem, and he goes right along with it, because it's not really the tutor's attention that he wants, but it's more your attention. And so maybe he feels that by dragging out the homework for 3 hours, he can get more of your attention through that time. So that could definitely be the case. And so in that case, the loving limits might not be the best way to meet that need for attention, although it does meet that need somewhat. It's there's other methods that are much more effective, like the play attention time, where you schedule periods where you just give him pure full attention. And the way to do this would be just to take some time where it's just you and Drew without your other children there, so that he really feels he's getting that one-on-one time with you, and then that really kind of fills up that need for attention, and he can be more cooperative in other situations.
I like that idea. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So that's a good one, and another one. We'll get into the family meeting bit shortly, and you can see where you can start to bring some discussion to this, because at the age of 10, he's totally able to start to verbally express some of his needs and desires, and start to share some of his ideas about how things might work more smoothly around the homework. So that's So that's I think I think you're right around the need for attention. That really seems to be the main one that's coming up, because I don't think the fact that they're doing the homework easily with the tutor shows that it's probably not stress, and it's probably not a role model issue. And you said that they have the capacity, so I think you're probably right with that.
Okay.
So it doesn't give us a great way to work with the setting the loving limits, but we can see how that we want to use different methods based upon what the real needs are. The other thing that I would say, like if it's a chronic issue with your children, that you set limits, and it's a continuous struggle to have them respect them, it's an indication that at some point, maybe they're feeling like there's a disconnect with the delivery of these limits, that the limits are kind of like barriers to connection, rather than something that they can grow from. Because limits, the loving limits that we want to set, they kind of act like a terrace that a vine can grow up, some strong foundation from which they can really grow and thrive from. That's the benefit of setting limits. So, but oftentimes, like it's how the limits are delivered where children feel like they're kind of being, talked down to, or.
I'm sorry, I have to go. Thank you.
Okay, have a good night. Okay, so there we go. So that was a great example by Amanda about a defiance issue, but it wasn't really a great opportunity for us to talk about setting loving limits, but we can see that we can use some of these other methods to get beyond the defiance. So let's go into the next one, because we can see that all of these different methods work together. And the next one we're going to talk about is natural consequences. So how does this work? We have the difference between coercive consequences and natural consequences. And so a lot of people mistake the two. And oftentimes they use what I call coercive consequences as a way to kind of threaten or manipulate their child into behaving properly. Okay? So the best description I found for this is from Karen Owens. And she says that natural consequences represent the pressure of reality without any specific action by parents. Okay? So that means what will happen if we just step away and let nature unfold itself. Those are the natural consequences. Okay? Now, allowing natural consequences to occur meets these needs, the need for connection. Now, here we're referring to the connection to reality, okay? Because coercive consequences don't always have a strong basis in reality. Oftentimes their basis is in our own underlying motives. Okay, so but by using natural consequences, it can really help a child understand reality, understand how things work on a more universal level. It also increases their need for security and safety because they start to, again, learn for themselves how the world works, how things function. Okay, so so that will allow them to have a lot better judgment in their interactions, whether it's with physical objects in their environment, and they become a lot more careful in how they move spatially, and so that they don't bump their head or fall down. Like with toddlers, by allowing a toddler to fall and learn how to get up, and letting them hurt themselves through their own unawareness, we teach them the natural consequences of not being aware and not being present, and they'll quickly self-adjust and start to be a lot more careful in how they move about in their physical environment. Okay, and that increases their need for security and safety through their awareness. And also, this refers to emotional safety and security. That we can use natural consequences in allowing children to experience the natural outcomes of sometimes their behavior towards other children, but so that they can learn how to behave and how to interact in more safe, emotionally safe ways. It also meets their need for autonomy, okay, because through experiencing the natural consequences of their choices and actions, that gives them an incredible amount of power to play with, the power of experiencing what happens when they make the choices that they want to make. Rather than us coddling all the time, we let them go out into the world, even if that world is just our safe environment that we have for them, the home or our community or the school, and then they become more and more autonomous as they start to learn how to navigate in that world in safe ways and reduce the negative natural consequences of their actions by themselves. It also meets their need for information because as they act in the world, they will constantly get feedback and information from the world. It meets their need for challenge as well because as they experience the natural consequences of their actions, they have to deal with those consequences, which can be challenging. And oftentimes, that deep need that we all have for challenge or, a type of stimulation that inspires us forward can be met simply by dealing with just the natural things that occur through our choices and actions in life. And again, it meets our need for consistency because, the more that we can experience the natural consequences of doing things, and if we start to get consistent results from these things, then we can really start to, that learning from that natural consequence really starts to sink in because of the consistency behind it. Okay? So when do we use natural consequences? Okay? So again, natural consequences are the limits imposed by reality, not by you. So reality is not always so loving, all right? And we all have experienced that. That's why sometimes setting limits is wiser than allowing the natural consequences to occur, right? Sometimes we don't want the natural consequences to occur because they may not be safe or they can actually lead to a child's feelings being hurt. They can lead to a child's increased sense of isolation or confusion, or it can lead to a child feeling criticized by someone or a group. Okay, so we want to be there for them and help them along and guide them, in the best direction possible. And sometimes we might see that allowing them, they're starting to make some decisions that you could see that the natural consequences of those might not be the necessary lesson for them at this stage of their development. So in that case, you might guide them away from experiencing the natural consequences of that situation and set a limit instead. Okay? So again, we've got to know when to use these methods, when not to. It's not always appropriate to use some of them. So in dealing with defiance, the key is not to use coercive consequences. So again, coercive consequences are the consequences that we designate through our own morals, our own principles, whatever. So, by saying, if you don't do homework, then you're not going to get your video game time. That's the consequence. Okay? So that's a coercive consequences. We're trying to coerce them into complying with doing their homework by having some type of bribe afterwards. So again, these are created solely by us. There is nothing natural about them at all. The natural consequences of not doing their homework could be a sense of isolation at school, criticism from their teacher, or confusion in the classroom. Again, these are things that we might want to try to keep them away from. So, when it comes to homework, natural consequences might not be the best technique to use. At other times, that can actually be effective, because some children, when they come to school and they didn't do their homework, and the consequences that come from that might not be traumatizing to them, but it might just be inspiring enough to them to want to actually do their homework the next time, so they don't have to re-experience this. So again, every situation is different. A lot of it has to do around the personality of the child, their upbringing, their worldview, the role models in their life, their interpersonal relationships and the other people they interact with, the other people involved. There's so many circumstances to any situation that we have to really take all these into consideration to figure out when's the best time to use these different methods. Okay, but again, the key in dealing with defiance is we want to move away from coercive consequences. So we want to try and save the definition of the whole word consequences to be only associated with natural consequences. Okay, so moving away from the whole sense of the idea of consequence to be based more on natural consequences and on reality. Because coercive consequences are a sort of threat, okay, and these increase the sense of disconnection, and they trigger a child's fear and the stress response as well, okay, in a child, and by giving them a break from punitive manipulation and encouraging cooperation through communication, this will engender their natural desire to contribute and to participate, okay? So by avoiding coercive consequences, we'll inspire greater trust, respect, and cooperation from your child. Because children are very quick to figure out when a parent is being coercive or manipulative, or when something isn't fair, right? They almost have like a radar for what is fair and what's not. And so whenever they sense that you're being manipulative or coercive, or not being completely upfront with you, they're going to sense that, and that will increase their tendency to defy you and to be resistant towards you, okay? All right, so next we're going to talk about democratic family meetings, okay? And then this is the last of the 4 methods that we're going to talk about around how to deal with defiance. And then we'll go into some of the questions and answers. So we'll go into family meetings. So how these work. The primary goal of the democratic style of family meetings is to increase the emotional bond between everyone. That is the primary goal. All other motives are secondary in importance. So family meetings meets these needs: the need for connection, the need for affection, the need for autonomy, because we create an environment where they can speak freely and and we respect what they have to say, and we take what they have to say under serious consideration. It also meets their need for information, because this is an opportunity to really communicate what's happening and why things are happening, and to give your child some of the information that they might be missing in order to figure out how everything fits together, and especially for them to understand how they fit into the bigger picture. And therefore, that will meet their need for contribution as well, when they feel part of the bigger picture, part of the family as an equal, and where they can see and experience where their contribution is being taken and being put into action in the family environment. That will go a long way for them to feel like they're participating more, and therefore to be more naturally cooperative. It also meets their need for attention, because during the family meetings, everyone will get their moments of attention. And it meets their need for creative expression as things are talked about, and as fun is explained, fun is shared as well through these family meetings. So there's 3 main parts to setting up successful democratic family meetings. The first is the opening, then we have the activities, which is kind of the main main period. The most time is spent in the second stage, and then the closing. So the idea is we want to kind of make these family meetings almost like a ritual. Beyond this opening and the middle part and the closing, and just focusing on connection as being the primary goal, everything else goes. Okay, you can use your own imagination, and there's innumerable ways that you can engage in family meetings and the things you can do. You don't always have to do them to bring up issues and to find solutions to problems. And especially for younger children, the way you want to do family meetings, you want to keep it away from the intellectual discussion at all and focus mostly just on that sense of connection. Okay, so let's talk about the first part of opening. So a great way to open a family meeting is to start off by sharing appreciations. And this is a wonderful exercise that you can do where you just start off and each person shares something, that they appreciate about someone else. And the important part here is that each person must say something about every person that they appreciate. Okay, and you don't want to leave anyone out or skip anyone. And this is just a wonderful way to kind of set the stage for positive openness appreciation. I highly encourage this exercise to be one that you start with. You can also start with a song, lighting candles, sharing something to drink, etc. I don't recommend starting the opening with food. It's great thing to have treats, to bake a homemade treat beforehand and get that ready for the family meeting. But that's something you want to save for the closing because the main family meetings you want to just save your mouth for talking and sharing more and to keep food out of it. And the next part, we go into the activities part, which is the central gist of the family meeting. And here you can do games, you can have discussions, you can talk about problems, you can do chore assignment, problem solving, you can allow children to question rules. It's basically an open floor for talking about anything. Okay? And again, with younger children, you might not do any talking. You might just do some type of game. Oftentimes, even just you can do these family meetings over dinner, and oftentimes the benefits come out as well during the dinner time. And we oftentimes have these three parts during dinner as well, where we might have the opening where everyone says bon appetit, or they might have a grace, and then the eating and the talking, and then the final part, the closing. If you did this at dinner, it would be everyone being excused from the table. At this point, the closing with a family meeting, though, another great thing you can do to close, if you didn't do it at the beginning, you can do it at the end, is share appreciations. Another wonderful exercise you can do is just have everyone go around and share one or even three things. I recommend three rather than one. Three things that they're looking forward to in the coming week or in the coming weeks. So anything about the future that they're looking forward to, any positive future anticipations. And again, this keeps the tone focused on optimism and positivity. You can also close with a song or with food or with sharing a homemade treat or these types of things. Okay, and this again, by having the opening and the closing, it helps to make a nice kind of parenthesis around the whole experience of the family meeting and to really ritualize it around us and create to kind of make it more special, which a lot of children will really appreciate. So so the way we use family meetings with dealing with defiance, we want to open the floor to really talk about the problems. Okay, so this is not a technique we use in the moment when a child is being defiant or oppositional, but this is how to approach the larger issue and to really open the floor for communication to figure out what might be some of the unmet needs or some of the other reasons why the child is showing this behavior. So we really want to create an environment where we can talk about the problem. So we just bring it up. What's the issue? And what we also want to do is communicate the needs and the reasons behind what it is the child is resistant about. For example, if the child is resistant about homework, here when we bring it up, we can say, okay, I want to talk about homework, and we've been having an issue. It's been an ongoing issue around the homework, and it's been taking a lot of time for us to do it. When I try and help you with the homework, just using this last example, we could say is that when Amanda was talking about her child, Drew, and his resistance to homework, when we have the family meeting, we could bring it up and say, we need to talk about the homework issue. And when I'm sitting down to help you, it ends up taking 3 hours. And, I don't mind, because I love spending this time with you, and I love seeing what you're doing in school, and I love helping you. But, the only problem is that it takes away time to do dinner, and then we end up staying up late, and dinner's late, and we're all hungry. Or you could communicate another reason why this is an issue, because you end up getting frustrated, and such and such. The key here is that you just want to be open in your communication. So as the parent, you can provide the model of expressing your feelings and just sharing with them what the issue is for you, why you're having an issue with this. And this goes a long way in meeting your child's need for information, because your child may not really understand why you get so wound up about the whatever it is that the issue is. Okay, whether it's the homework, they might not understand why you're the one that's always freaking out about the homework. And they'll say, well, I hate doing homework too, and but that's opening the door to a deeper discussion. So the next thing is that when we invite the child to share why they're being defiant. Okay, so after you just open the floor to the problem, you communicate the needs and the reasons behind whatever the issue it is. For example, talking about homework, we talk about the need to complete the homework because the teacher expects it, and such and such and such, and the child needs to learn, how to read and write, etc. And then we invite the defiant child to share why they're having a problem with this, why they're defiant with us. Okay, and the next point is really important. We want to hear the child out. We don't want to contradict them. We don't want to demean them. We don't want to interrupt them. We don't want to in any way patronize anything they say. Okay, we want to treat our child with the same respect that you expect from them. Okay, be open to changing your mind and being flexible that to whatever your child says. Okay. Because now this is an important point, this last one. So when your child does start to share what they say, you can be open to whatever they have to say. And you might want to change your mind about whatever the issue is. Now sometimes you can't be completely flexible around something like the need to do homework or something else, but you might be flexible around the time that you do it, or the way that it's done, or something else. Maybe they really like having a tutor, but you can't afford to hire a tutor all the time. So you can express that to them that, I'm happy to get you to have a tutor to help you with this. I can see that you guys are thriving with this, but, we have limited amount of money, and we need to, save some of it for a trip or whatever. But, just it's okay to be open with your child. The more open you are in terms of communicating your needs and the underlying needs that they might not be aware of, and sharing more information with them, again, the more they're going to take your lead, and they're going to model that same thing with you, and they'll start to share more, and they'll start to communicate more, and they'll start to be more open with you, and that really just opens the bridge for deeper connection, communication, and to find a resolution that works for everybody. Okay? So oftentimes, children will have some really great ideas and have some great logic and clear thinking behind some of the things they share. And they might question a limit, or they might question a rule or a routine. And then after consideration and after discussion, you might actually realize that there might be a different way to do it. So there's no reason to be dogmatically stubborn or rigid around all the limits you set or all the rules. And by showing flexibility, by showing consideration, by showing respect for everyone's opinion, and by showing that your ability to alter and to change things, then that goes a long way to teaching your own child to be adaptable and to be open and being cooperative, right? Because if you're willing to kind of let down your guard, or to be more flexible in your approach, to be less resistant to your child's ideas and their desires and their wants, and they'll do the same for you. They're going to model that for you as well. So The other thing to keep in mind is after the meeting, right? After you have a family meeting and you've come to some type of solution around a problem that seems to be a win-win, and then you go about your activities in the week, and then your child starts to become defiant again around the same issue, okay? What do you do then? Okay, this is a critical moment, okay, because you've come up with a decision and agreement from the previous family meeting that may have been just that same day, or it may have been before, the day before, or even last week. But then the problem re-arises. How do you respond at that time? The important thing is not to be critical to your child, okay? Don't react emotionally. You want to respond situationally, okay? Go back to those 3 reasons. Okay, it may not be that your child has forgot what they've said, but it might be that maybe they're stressed. Maybe the stress has kind of has become worse in that week because of different pressures and demands, and it's tipped them over to the edge to the point that they're unable to respond appropriately and to follow through on what they're saying. Right, and us as parents and adults, we know what this is like. Sometimes we get stressed ourselves, and the smallest thing just puts us over the edge. Where when we're calm and together and collected, we won't react under the same circumstances. So we want to be empathetic, and we want to really meet our child where they're at so that we can figure out what the underlying reasons for their behavior is and approach them from there. So we want to use kind of gentle reminders, okay, and speak to them using the connective communication to remind them about what was discussed and the new approach we're going to take around this thing. And then again, reach for them, right? And in that moment, you can use your eye contact, use the connective communication to reach through the disconnect, reach through the behavior, reach through the defiance, and to see what's happening for them, what's going on for them, where are they at in the moment. And sometimes just giving them that extra few minutes of attention, really connecting with them, speaking to them in a way that it's meeting their needs for connection. They feel that you're present with them, that you're listening to them. That might be all that they needed in order to meet that extra need for attention, or that extra need for affection, to help them through the little road bump that they might have just gone through that day because of a variety of circumstances. And then that could be just enough to tip them over the edge to feeling more connected and being more cooperative. Okay. Often the distance between defiance and stubbornness and cooperation and engagement is so minute that even a word, one sentence, or just a shift in the tone of voice is enough to transform the child to being more connected and to being more engaged. So that's an amazing thing about children, is how buoyant they are and how adaptable they are and how quickly they can go from being really upset to being extremely happy, right? And we can see this oftentimes with siblings or friends of children. They might fight one moment, the next moment they're playing together and everything's okay. Okay, so we need to understand that sometimes the gap between the difficult behavior and the opposition isn't as great as we think. And by getting emotionally bound up ourselves about it, we're just increasing that gap, right? Rather than diminishing that gap and bringing our child over to the cooperative side by us reacting emotionally and getting fixed on the defiant behavior, we're actually fueling that fire rather than calming and quelling those flames by being patient and persistent in our loving connection and using the water to overcome the fire. So again, democratic parenting's approach to overcoming defiance and opposition, we want to be like water. Patience and persistence overcomes the worst stubbornness and the resistance. And we want to practice these methods, okay? Don't expect perfection. These took me years and years and years to work on and to practice and to figure out. And they're it's an ongoing balance, because every situation is different, and the children are always evolving and growing. They're going through new stages all the time. Their needs are always shifting based upon their age and what they're learning and what they're experiencing and the relationships that they're forming. So things are always moving, and we need to just be easy on ourselves as parents and not be too critical with ourselves. Make sure that we're getting our own needs met as well, so that we can really be present and be patient. Because if we're stressed ourselves, and we're impatient with our own lives and ourselves, and then it's impossible for us to be patient and really present with our kids. So we need to do whatever we need to do in order to clear our own stress. If we need to go exercise, if we need to meet with friends, if we need to phone in the babysitters for a night so that we can go party with our friends and just let loose a little bit, so that we can come back to be with our kids in a more present and sustained way, then we need to do that for them, okay? Because we can only give our children what we give to ourselves. If our own emotional reserves are empty, it's impossible for us to give anything to our kids, okay? Also, we want to aim for win-win solutions so that everybody's needs are met, okay? Parents quickly get exhausted and start to feel even a little bit kind of, what's the word, feel kind of upset, or I can't think of the word right now, but if the parent is feeling a bit like a martyr, like they're giving of themselves too much, that their needs won't be met. So it needs to be a win for you as the parent as well as for the child. And then for everyone involved too, especially if we're a teacher and we're working with a classroom, it has to be a win-win for everybody, right? We can't bend things for all the children in the class. But sometimes that can also be a win-win for everybody if we make adjustments. If everyone makes an adjustment or a compromise for one person, sometimes it doesn't hurt the whole group, it doesn't hurt the whole situation, and in fact, it can teach a lot of great benefits like empathy and care and a sense of love and compromise as well for the benefit of everyone in the long term. And the final thing is we want to focus on winning our children's hearts, right? Win your child's heart. If you have your child's heart, you'll have their cooperation, because children naturally want our approval. They want our affection. They want to be in our good books. So if we have our child's heart, they're going to act in ways that are entirely cooperative and easy. And the defiance and the resistance will be very minimal. It will be just that healthy, natural desire to test limits. And then by using connective communication techniques and these other methods, you can communicate why you have these limits there. And then the child won't test them unless after the communication they feel that there might be room for continuing to test them, and then there might be a great opportunity to even be flexible with these limits and evolve into some new type of routine or environment with your child's contribution, which can be incredibly powerful for everybody and will then just win your child's trust and their heart and their respect even more. And the more that you have their respect and the more that you show them the respect, the more that respect becomes the name of the game, and communication and cooperation become a lot easier. Okay, so we're going to go into the question and answer period 2, and I just want to let everybody know about next week's webinar. Next Thursday, we have a webinar on love between parents, overcoming differences in parenting styles. And this is a webinar I chose to do because it's a question I get time and time again from parents of how they can deal with their spouse or the other parent who has a different style of parenting, or maybe disagreements in parenting styles. How can we overcome that and be a model for love and communication and cooperation for our children as parents? So we're going to go into this in next week's webinar. You can get tickets at www.happyparents.eventbrite.com. Also, you can go to our website and you'll see that as well. So I'll take some questions now. So if any of you have questions, there's a little question box right there. Just type them in and I'll start to go through them. Let's see, we'll start up. Okay. Okay, so let's start with Amanda. She has a question. My child uses rude language at the dinner table. What should I do? Okay, so that's a great question. So rude language. All right, there's a couple things that we can do with rude type of language. When a child's using rude language, they're oftentimes looking for a response. Okay, so that's an indication of the need for attention, right? Because they're getting attention through that. So by using the methods of play attention time or family meetings, and meeting that need for attention in other areas, that tendency to try and seek that attention in these types of ways will diminish. The other thing you want to do is to set a firm limit with that. So anytime the child says something rude, we can just kind of look at them, and and we don't have to get super serious with them, but we can just say, hey, none of that. Like, my son, for example, he'll say a rude word every now and again, but he doesn't say it to try and get my attention, and it's not to be naughty, because he gets my attention from other ways. So it's not a need that he has. So he'll say it just sometimes out of curiosity, or because he hears it, he'll repeat it. And he often knows that it's inappropriate, so it's not something that he'll do again. And he doesn't do it to test the limit. So but I maintain that limit. Anytime I hear him say that, I remind him, sweetie, I don't want to hear those words here. But I don't say it in a way that makes him feel disconnected, like suddenly he's being harshly scolded. I don't want to make him feel like he's wrong, because the moment that he feels wrong is when there's that isolation and disconnection, and then it's counterproductive to meeting those needs and winning their hearts. So, I'll even sometimes, when he'll say something, like he actually said a word last week, just last weekend, and and I kind of chuckled while I said, I don't want to hear those. So I took all the seriousness and all the tension that are often surrounded around these words out of it by using a light tone of voice and by chuckling a little bit, because I don't want to enhance the that tension and the negative feelings associated with those words. I'd rather neutralize those so that my child realizes that he doesn't need to find attention by using those, that there's much better ways to get attention, and that really it's kind of silly to use those words anyways. So I hope that kind of helps answer that question. Okay, here's another question from Amanda. My child wakes up every morning and we tell him not to. My child wakes us up every morning and we tell him not to. He's 10. How do we get him to stop? Okay, so again, we were talking about your son. This is Drew, I'm assuming. So I think that you're right in that, as we talked about, that he needs some attention. That's another indication that he's needing attention, because he wants your attention first thing in the morning, by waking you up, even though he's told not to. So that's a great thing to bring up in the family meeting, as well as to talk about this morning routine. And what I would try to do is to try and work with him to create a new routine in the morning that he can feel like he's contributing to this. So rather than waking you up in the morning, he's got something else to do. And then, so in the family meeting, you can talk about it. So, what else could you do in the morning rather than wake us up? What would be interesting? What would be fun? And he might say, oh, watch TV, play video games, and that might not be appropriate. So, you could say, use the connective communication by acknowledging and, expounding upon, so, and encouraging. You say, that's a really great idea. The only thing, though, is that, we don't watch video games first thing in the morning. We have a rule or whatever. Is there anything else that we could do? What about doing such and such, or this or that, or so you can offer some suggestions to guide him in a direction. But that's something that should be discussed, and then he might forget because it might just be a pattern of him waking up and running straight into your room. So what you could do is you could even just lock the door, and if he knocks on the door, you could just let him know, say, sweetie, we're going to be up in half an hour or whatever. Remember, this is the time for you to do such and such that was discussed at the meeting. Okay, so that's some ways to do that. But again, what we could do then is use the connective communication again, so that you're not scolding him and making him feel like crushing his desire to connect with you first thing in the morning. Use that connective communication to set that limit of not waking you up, and then again using the family meetings to talk about the issue at a different time rather than right in the moment. Okay, let's see here. All right, so Amanda again asks, my child frequently becomes rude in the car when his friends are there and they use obnoxious words. How do we stop this? Okay, so again, using, we want to set firm limits there. What you could do in that circumstance, if they don't stop at your initial limit that you set, you could just pull the car over, and put it in park, and then turn around to make eye contact, and use some of the connective communication methods by giving them your full attention. And that will often get everyone's attention really quick. When you show that full presence with your eye connection, and you're not reacting emotionally, but you're actually in control of your emotions, and you're indicating that by using the connective communication, that's an incredibly powerful and respectful stance that children actually appreciate. So they'll tend to be a lot more cooperative and open at that point when you give them that full attention and really approach them with full respect to set a firm limit. Rather than just kind of looking in the mirror, and then starting to call them out individually and using kind of blame language of saying, Drew, don't do this, and pointing fingers, that can be very ineffective because the child knows that you're not fully aware and you're not fully attentive to it. But when you pull over, that's a very effective way to get their attention right in the car. And again, set that limit. And again, be like water. Make your patience and your persistence deeper than their stubbornness or their defiance. So, if they start to be rude again, you can pull over again, or you can just call the whole thing off, and you can use a natural consequence, which can sound like a coercive consequence, but it's a consequence that is a natural relationship consequence, where if you feel that you're being disrespected, you don't want to kind of engage in that type of relationship or in that interaction. So if you're headed towards going somewhere, going on an outing or something with their friends, and they're starting to be obnoxious, and you pull over and you set a limit and you keep going, and and they don't respect your limit after a couple of after you repeat the limit a few times, at that point you might say, what, guys, I love hanging out with you. At this point, you'd want to pull over again to say this and set this limit. But it's almost like a mini quick meeting without the opening or anything like that. And you'd say, what, I love hanging out with all of you and interacting with you, but like I've said before, we don't want to hear this language in this car. And it's, I've asked you all a few times, and you keep doing this. So in this case, I'm afraid that, I'm not going to be able to follow through on my promise to take you to wherever. So that's kind of a way to use a consequence which borders on coercive consequence. So we really have to watch our tone of voice and our motives behind using this type of thing. But again, if we can approach it from this sincere perspective that you really want to be there with them, but if they're going to be too difficult for you to emotionally handle, then you can't actually be with them in the way that you want to, and therefore you have to change your plans accordingly. So I think that's a fine way, and it is a kind of a man-made consequence on one hand, but it is a natural consequence as well, because that's something they're going to encounter in the real world. If they're obnoxious and disrespectful to other people, those people aren't going to want to engage with them and to carry through on their agreements and their interactions either. So that's one way that you can use natural, or we could just call them consequences at this point. Okay, so another question from Amanda. Once a child has been exposed to media like a movie with a bad role model, how do you stop them from imitating it? Okay, that's a great question. Oftentimes, there's not much we can do than just letting it run its course. Children sometimes just have to kind of process it. I would still set those limits. So anytime your child kind of brings up that behavior, you can say, what, sweetie, that behavior is inappropriate. I know you watched that. If you want to say those things or behave those ways, you can do that on your own when you're playing by yourself, but not around me and not with your brothers. I don't want to hear that. That's not an appropriate way to talk. So, just setting a firm, loving limit so that they feel respected, and then just letting it run its course. Oftentimes, the child just needs to kind of act it out, and we call it symbolic play, where they process some type of experience or behavior that they saw. And after just working it through and processing it through acting it out and doing the symbolic play, they'll work it out of their system, and they'll get over it eventually. Okay. Okay, another question from Amanda. We got all your questions here, and then we got some others that have come in. So, my child often smiles and laughs when he senses he has upset me, and it seems to take great pleasure in misbehaving. What can I do to stop this? Oh, well, that's very interesting. So, like you said, Amanda, if if he really has an unmet need for attention, it might be, again, that's just an indication that he's happy that he has your attention by smiling and laughing. So by using that play attention time and scheduling those with him, what I would do, because you've indicated a few different issues that have come up, so I imagine there's, and that's a kind of ongoing thing. I would schedule probably at least 1 hour, maybe 2-hour sessions with him per week to start, and I would schedule that for maybe a month, and then maybe start to do it once a week, and maybe you can start to reduce the time. But by starting off with kind of just giving him a good dose of full attention, using this play attention time twice a week, schedule it right into your agenda, and so that he also knows that this is a special time, just you and him, at the minimum 1 hour. I wouldn't say you need to go more than 2 hours, but any amount of time between 1 and 2 hours would be a good amount of time to give him that full attention, and that will really help to meet all those needs, and therefore he'll probably stop misbehaving in these different ways. Okay, question from Veronica. Veronica asks, I had trouble signing in. Can you let me know when's a good time to ask a specific question about my child's defiance in the context of 50-50 split custody? All right, Veronica, now's the time. So go ahead and type that in here, and then I'm sure I'll get your question as I move down this chat box. Next question from Angela. What if the limit is broken? What is the consequence? Okay, so we talked about that. I talked about a way that you can use a consequence around a broken limit. If your child's completely unwilling to comply and to cooperate, then you can just set a limit by changing the plan, right? If you had a plan to do something or to go somewhere or to get something, and your child's just very uncooperative, you can change the plan. Sometimes changing the plan might be to their liking. Sometimes it might be not to their liking. Oftentimes it's effective when it's not to their liking because they sense, oh no, that's not what I want. I want to go play with my friend, or I want to go, swimming or whatever, but they're misbehaving and they're being impossible. And you just be honest with them. You say, you know what, sweetie, I really want to go to the beach with you too and have a great day, but I've asked you a few times to stop swearing or to do such and such, and you keep on resisting me. So I don't really know what to do, and I don't really want to go to the beach with you now. I feel like it's not going to be a fun time for me at all. So what should we do? And and just open up the conversation, right? So you can see that it's not a coercive consequence, because you're not saying it's how you're delivering it. Again, remember, it's how these things are delivered more than what it is, what we're saying. So a coercive consequence, a manipulative consequence would be saying, sweetie, if you don't start behaving, we're not going to the beach. Okay, so that's your straight up threat consequence. And then, but turn it into connective communication is to say, like I just said, and just be open, share your feelings, share your desires, share the fact that you're actually kind of at a loss and you don't even know how to respond to this. So that's the only solution you see that might work for you, because there's no other, you feel like it's going to be a nightmare to take them to the mall or take them to wherever. And then the child will often that opens the door for them to communicate as well by saying, what do you think? How can we solve this issue here? So here again, we're by using that type of communication, you're not using a blame phrase, you're using a neutral phrase. You're saying, you're talking about how you're having a hard time and you're at a loss, and you're talking about it as something that we can do together. What's the solution we can find, right? You're using this connective communication language, talking about we, increasing the sense of togetherness, and that can go a great way in delivering the consequence, right? Another thing to do is just to wait, right? Like oftentimes, if you can show your child that your patience is deeper than their stubbornness, for example, they're not going to put on their boots or whatever, it's just to kind of wait for them to put on their boots and just stand there and practice meditation or whatever it is, and just wait for them to do whatever it is they're defying. And be, and this is a time to practice whatever types of, calming methods you might know, so that you can just relax yourself. Then that will kind of that kind of sets the stage for them to model that behavior as well. So it's a big balance when we want to how we can respond to setting these limits. And it's not always appropriate to use the patience and wait your child out. Like sometimes when you need to actually get out the door quickly and they're being resistant and defiant, so waiting would be completely counterproductive. So so you set a limit. You say we have to be out the door at such and such, or we have to go right now, and they're still not doing it. What do you do in that moment? There's lots of options, but the key here and the way we want to approach this to create a permanent shift is we need to look at it entirely situational and step away from the urgency of moment-to-moment defiance and work on the sense of connection and the sense of engagement that a child has to meet all those underlying needs that have gone unmet and are the cause of the defiance and the resistance. So then when we can meet those, the resistance is less. And when the limit's broken, we can look at and explore the consequences. And the more we practice these methods, the more they'll just become second nature, and you'll find yourself using the connective communication methods just quite naturally without even realizing you're using them as you start to just develop this approach, because it's really just an approach to keep that connection and maintain the connection with the child. Okay, question from Faith. My daughter is adopted and has attachment issues. We are working on this with a psychologist, but I'm wondering if it's okay for a kid with an attachment disorder. She is 7.5. Okay, I think your question here, you're wondering if these methods are okay for a child with attachment disorders. Oh, definitely. If that's your question, then all of these actually increase attachment. A lot of these stem and are rooted in some of the attachment parenting methods as well. So, as you can see, we've all talked about connection. So anyone even with an attachment disorder or attachment issue, that issue can be fixed and cured over time, because it's a natural human tendency to connect with those around them. So, it's harder, of course, for young children who have gone through these types of issues, because it's part of their worldview of having a resistance or a kind of shying away from connection because of fear of the loss of connection. But the more that we can meet our child's needs for security and affection and connection, the more that they'll start to warm up to the connection. So these methods are extremely effective for your child, Faith. So I highly encourage you to use them. Okay, another question from Christine. Dealing with defiance, talking about the problem, etc. Okay, so during the family meetings session, when we're talking about the problem, would it not be better to initially have a private meeting with the particular child? Okay, rather than bringing it up in a family meeting, would it not be a good idea to talk to the child privately? Definitely, in some instances, that can be a very effective and great way to go about it. So, trust your gut on this, because, again, every situation is so unique and there's so many circumstances, it's impossible for me to speak generally to all of them. But so if you feel that might be the best approach, then definitely give it a try. That can be a very good way to do it. And oftentimes that is a much more effective way as well, especially when we have sibling rivalries or other issues that might be there. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so this is another question from Faith. When my daughter doesn't get her way, she's quick to anger, sometimes gets violent with me, but not often as before. She also calls us names. She's good at saying us no when we ask her if something is wrong. Right. Okay, so 7.5 your daughter is, and so that's still very young to start to talk, rationally about feelings. and especially if she's violent and has attachment disorder and is emotional, that's an indication that a lot of the issues stem more on the emotional level, and there might be a lot of stress from going through the attachment issues with the biological mother and going through the adoptions and everything. So there's a lot of situational stress that can be stored and unresolved there. So talking about them and asking her if something's wrong, or when you ask her to do something, it's natural that she'll say no, and for her calling you names, what you want to do is set loving limits with that type of behavior. Same thing with violence. So if you have my book, Democratic Parenting, read the chapter on setting limits, because I just kind of briefly touched the technique, but there's sections on how to set limits with aggression, how to set limits with temper tantrums, and there's some really good guidelines to follow. And these are the same kind of guidelines you'd follow when a child would call you names, because that's kind of a verbal type of aggression that we can use the same limit setting methods with. So the key here with setting these limits is you want to maintain that love and that connection you want to reach through. So a great thing with this is to really use the connective communication of using those terms of endearment, like the loving sweetheart type of terminology will kind of act like water to subdue the fire that is being expressed through the aggression or the name calling. Okay, so Emma says, I love your webinar. I think one of the main points here in parenting that encompasses all that you have pointed out is being in the now with your child, being present, which I feel is a huge pressure with today's busy times, but not impossible so that will be my main focus. Thanks. Exactly, Emma. That's exactly the point. When you're present, then you can be responsive to the actual needs in the situation, to where your child is at. You can respond to where they're at in the moment, rather than reacting emotionally, being triggered by your child emotionally, or by getting wrapped up in kind of dogmatic responsive to what you think should be appropriate and inappropriate, when there's often deeper needs and important issues that need to be addressed. So you're exactly right. Thanks, Emma, for that feedback. You're entirely correct here. So Kelly asks, what's a good way to diffuse yelling? Our little girl yells constantly. We try very hard to stay calm even while she's yelling, and try to praise her when she uses a calm voice, but she still yells a great deal. Okay, so that's I'm not exactly sure how old your daughter is, and again, the very first thing you want to do, Kelly, is to look at these 3 reasons and ask yourself, what might be the reasons why she's yelling like this? Could there be some unmet needs? Could there be some role modeling at play? Or maybe some stress that is built up? Okay, so but the best approach would be to set limits around that. So whenever she yells, you could set the verbal limit and say, sweetie, we don't want you to yell like that, darling. Is there, but then she's very emotional, so she'll probably start to yell again. So, I don't know if she's just kind of yelling in a tantrum kind of state, or if it's she's yelling at other children or yelling at you, more of an aggressive type of state. But if she's yelling at someone else, then it's kind of almost like an act of aggression or violence towards the other, where you want to set a limit there, a very firm but loving limit, to bring her back to presence and to communicate to her quite verbally that that's not appropriate behavior. So you can use the connective communication methods of your posture and your positioning. You might kind of kneel down to touch her on the shoulder. Using a physical touch can be quite effective, just kind of bringing her out of her emotions back into her body a little bit. Getting that eye contact is extremely powerful for reaching through the disconnect that's being expressed through that yelling. And then using soft, soothing a tone of voice and words that really bridge that connection. So again, here you can see that all these methods are like using water against the fire of her yelling. Okay, and that can be a way to kind of set a limit against her yelling again towards someone else. And you could say stuff like, sweetie, I'm not going to let you yell at so-and-so, or, yeah, I'm sorry, darling, but we don't yell at each other here. So that's, and then she might yell again, and that could actually lead into having a big temper tantrum and a big emotional release through tears and tantrums, which can be incredibly healing for the stress. And I didn't talk in this webinar about how to heal from stress, but in my book, we talk about that. We talk about the benefits of tantrums and how to help a child have a healing tantrum. And there's very specific guidelines to follow around setting a safe limit around a child who's having the tantrum so that it becomes a healing response. But the key with it is you want to maintain that connection, that full loving attention with your child when they're having a yell or having a freak out, with the eye contact or whatever, so that they feel that you're right there with them. By doing that, you're also communicating to them that they needn't yell to have your full attention, that your full attention is there for them regardless if they're yelling or not. But sometimes they're so pent up with feelings and emotions that yelling like that is kind of like it's a vent. They're venting those feelings of frustration. It's actually a healing response to get that pent up tension and pressure and stress out of their body. So we have to, again, look at the reasons and behind that. Okay. Next question from Rachel. She asked, how would you use family meetings with a 4- and 2-year-old? My 4-year-old's behavior is defiant. He will look you dead in the eye and do or say again what you ask him not to do. Okay, that's a very great question around defiance. So in this case, these children are much too young to engage family meetings with around discussing defiance, okay? Because a 4-year-old is much too young to start to engage in intellectual discussions and rationalizations, and you can't really hold a child that age accountable for their actions after the family meeting, even if they agree to something in the family meeting. So the family meetings for children at this age would be just focused on connection. So you could just do things like play games, sing songs, do crafts together, these types of activities, and you'd steer away from any type of intellectual discussion or discussions about any behavioral problems. Okay, so do not talk about those. Do not try and seek resolutions or ask them for opinions about their behaviors during these discussions. Okay, so it's better not to bring their behavior into their minds in terms of trying to talk about it with children this age, because you're going to go nowhere. These children at this age, they're just purely in their feelings. So what we want to do is to respond to them in the moment. And again, you need to ask yourself, what are the underlying reasons for your 4-year-old's defiance? Are there unmet needs? Is it role modeling they've been exposed to? Or could stress be a factor? Okay, and ask yourself those and look at some of the needs, and then start to do whatever it is to meet those unmet needs or to help your child heal from the stress. Okay, and it's very common, again, for older children to be defiant, especially with younger children, because again, they feel that some of their attention was stolen from the younger child, and so they can get very defiant just in ways to kind of get some extra attention, or it's their way to trying to express to you maybe some unresolved hurts around that change in family dynamics ever since the younger child came in. Even though the younger child's 2 years old, so they've been in their life 2 years, they may still not have fully recovered from that change in attention that's being shared. Oftentimes, too, parents and it's an honest and innocent mistake we make of just trying to putting too much pressure on the older child, expecting too much of them while making more room for error for the younger child. And the older child is very quick to see this unfairness where they're being held more accountable to their actions than the younger child. And it can be extremely frustrating for the older child, and they won't be able to verbally express that, okay? So they'll start to act out in these ways. So another thing you can do is to just take a look at that and see perhaps maybe if you might be a little bit harder on your older child or expecting a little bit more of them than the younger child, and then maybe make some adjustments around that. So, I would take I would look specifically at the needs for maybe affection. You might try and start to use more those terms of endearments with your child when you're communicating with them. A need for attention. Use some of the play attention time, schedule some play attention time in with that child. And then also look at stress, okay? Because if they're looking at you dead in the eye and they're still being defiant, that's an indication that they're feeling some type of pain, that there's some unresolved hurt there, and they're trying to actually make you feel that same pain by looking you in the eye and going ahead with an action that they feel might hurt you. And that's their way of trying to communicate to you that they're hurting. They're trying to show you that, okay, by making you feel the same pain. Very, very similar as just, actually hurting, physically hurting another to try and make them feel the pain we're hurting. So I hope that's helpful for you, Rachel. Next question by Mary Ann. My child, 9 years old, screams, "I hate you," when she's told no, or a limit is set. How do we stop the verbal abuse from her? Okay, so first off, we need to change the perspective of being verbal abuse to that's her way to try to communicate to you that there are some unmet needs there, or that there's some built-up stress there. Okay, so if you look at it as it's verbal abuse from her, it's really approaching the situation from a separative angle of us against her, or kind of pointing the finger, and you're already approaching it from blaming her for the behavior. So although the it's very aggressive behavior that she's showing, that's her way of trying to tell you, "Mommy, I'm having a hard time here, and I don't know what else to say or do." Okay, and it's coming out in a very more of a ugly way of saying "I hate you," which is very hurtful and is very, very hard. But that's just her way of trying to tell you that she's having a hard time dealing with something. So again, we want to look at those three reasons. What are some of the unmet needs? Is there any tension or stress built up? And I would say that there must be some type of tension or stress built up, because that's usually behind any type of strong emotionally based feelings, right? Of screaming, "I hate you," these types of things. So she's obviously very upset about something. So you can use some of the methods to heal from stress, which are in the book Democratic Parenting, or in the webinars on childhood stress disorder. I talk a lot more about how to heal from childhood stress, and so you can help your child towards that. And again, I would really take a look at the connective communication bit again, because oftentimes it's again how we communicate these things, not so much what we're communicating. So I would stay away from no, okay, because obviously that's not working for you or for her. So use some of the words like "not right now," "I'm afraid not," "I'm sorry, sweetie," that's not gonna work at this moment. And that might still cause her to flip out and to yell, scream, I hate you," or whatever. So again, we want to try and reach through that disconnect. We want to maintain our cool, not get triggered by her, and to see that expression in her as her way of trying to reach through to us by saying, "Mommy, I don't know how to deal with these strong feelings. Can you help me?" That's what she's trying to say through that aggressive talk. That's the underlying communication she's trying to get through to you. So, a great thing to do would be to engage her in more family meetings. And you might not want to bring this up specifically, this issue, or you may try and talk around it to try and open the discussion to figure out what other things might be bothering her. So you could look at her overall environment. Maybe there might be something at school or in her community. There might be some bullying happening that she's really upset about, and she doesn't know how to communicate to you, so it's coming through in this type of way. Or it might again just be how you're telling her no. Maybe she's feeling like you're really disconnected or being a bit harsh in how you're saying no. So if you start to use the connective communication a bit more, where she feels that you're really attentive and connective and really taking in what she's saying, maybe by acknowledging and encouraging her before expounding and redirecting her, that might go a long way for her to feel more heard and more connected. I hope that's helpful for you, Marianne. Thanks for that. Okay, another question by Emma. When disciplining my older child and I ask him to look at me, he sometimes does a deliberate stare or might just roll his eyes. Is this something you should choose to ignore and act like water? As I find it very disrespectful. Okay, so again, when our child is showing us disrespect, we always have to, we can't blame them for that. That's an indication that our approach is somehow inspiring disrespect. We're not connecting with them in our approach in the way that we want to. So whenever our child responds to us in a way that we didn't want our child to respond to us, like they're being defiant or they're being disrespectful or staring or glaring or rolling their eyes, that's an indication that what we just said, our delivery was a little bit off. So we want to just, correct and continue, right? Just we can be like water and then try a different approach. But if we feel that at some points it's really inappropriate, there can be a great opportunity to set a loving limit there. But again, all the loving limits and all the connected communication and even all the discussions, the main focus is connection. So, if a child's not looking at us and we ask them to look at us and they roll their eyes, that's them telling us, sure, I'm looking at you, but I'm still feeling really disconnected from you. And just looking at you doesn't mean that I'm any more connected, right? That's what they're communicating to us by glaring or rolling their eyes at us. So what we can try to do is to try to kind of tease or tickle out their eye contact in a more creative way to try and take some of the some of the tension out of the situation. Because if this is happening when you're disciplining your older child, he's feeling maybe isolated or criticized at that moment, so he's not feeling connected at all. So and so he's just communicating that to you. So there might be other ways that you can try and get that eye contact, or that might be something you could just ignore and maybe not even ask, try and seek that eye contact, because it's just increasing the disconnect, and maybe he's actually more receptive prior to you demanding that he looks at you. So those are things that you can try. Okay, so a question from Rachel. We set limits and my 4-year-old will say, you are not acting like you love me and like you say you do. You're not acting like you love me like you say you do. How would you react to this? Keeping my limits but letting him know that we do love him, and that is why we set limits. Okay, well, that's a great question, Rachel. And wow, it sounds like you have just such a wonderful, expressive and open 4-year-old who's willing to be so upfront and honest and sincere with you. So, what I would do is I would follow their lead, and I would really take what they're saying to heart. Because again, when we're setting limits, we're asking for our child for their respect, right? We're asking them to respect the limits that we set. But if they respond to us and we don't respect what they say, then we're just being hypocritical. So I would just ask them to expand on that. So if the child says, you're not acting like you love me like you say you do, you can just say, well, what do you mean by that, sweetheart? And that opens the door for a beautiful discussion, for a deeper connection, and for more communication, right? So just follow that. Be like water. Go with the flow with your child. Acknowledge what they say. Encourage what they say, and allow them to express and to share more, to figure out what they're really saying, and be open to being flexible with your limits, because sometimes you do need to be flexible with some of them. And again, saying that, like I said before, oftentimes it's not what we're doing or what the limit is, but how we're delivering it. So your child might simply be telling you straight up that you just need to be a little bit more empathetic and loving and considerate in your delivery of setting limits. So maybe just using a little bit more of the connective communication, adjusting your tone of voice, maybe adjusting your eye contact, using those methods we talked about can help perhaps bridge that gap and make your child feel like you still love them. Okay. Question from Veronica. My son is defiant and disrespectful. I was hoping to get some feedback. Okay. Okay, here's the full question. My son is 13. He's very bright. He has become almost inextricably defiant with me and is deliberately provoking me, saying he wants to go live with his father. His father and I are amicable and cooperate well. My son is gifted but failing classes. He has become so harsh. His behavior has escalated with age, but was not predicted by the divorce. Was not predicated by the divorce, which was final a year ago. Can you offer any ideas? Okay, well, because he's 13, so he's a young man, teenager, young teenager, and he's coming into his manhood, and so that's a whole different level of defiance and of self-awareness. So what I would do is, a great thing to do with teens is to just really be open and communicative, and try to find out things that he's interested in and spend more time with him doing those things that he's interested in. So whatever it is he's doing, even if he's just playing video games, is to, and maybe they're video games that you hate, but just to sit down with them and to watch them and to talk with him, and to get his feedback and let him kind of direct the interaction while he plays his video games, or anything it is that he can feel that you really care for him and you're interested in him, because that's a really big thing for young teenagers, is that they want to really feel like the adults are interested in them. When they feel that adults aren't interested in them, they become very uninterested in the adults as well. Also, being 13, if he says he wants to go live with his father, I don't know the full situation involved here, but perhaps, if you have a good relationship and you cooperate well, there's I don't see any reason here why perhaps you can't let him go live there and experience the natural consequences of that as well. There might be other reasons why not, but from what you share with me, nothing is indicated there. So that might be, maybe he's just saying, like, that he really feels like he needs more autonomy. And, that's a big, big need that is often unmet with children or teens that are very defiant, as they feel that they need more autonomy. So if he's saying he wants to go live with his father, then perhaps this is a great opportunity to give him that chance. And then that also might make your time with him a lot more special when you are with him. And then what you can do is really schedule some of that play attention time with him, whether he's living with you or living with his father, so that you can really connect with him and he feels that those needs for connection and attention and affection are being met just simply by your interest in him. So, and then the other thing here is, if the divorce was just settled a year ago, a final year ago, I don't know how long the separation was, but that can still be, it can take years and years for children to get over divorces and separations from their parents. So even if it was kind of smooth and everything like that, that can still be a big adjustment for children, particularly, a child who's going through puberty, because he's starting to look at girls and intimate relationships and stuff as well can start to happen. So, when he sees trouble between his parents, that can kind of be a bit of an issue that can surface and cause some internal struggles and some confusion. And and because he cannot probably starting to relate more with his father, coming into his manhood, sometimes the mothers or the parents of the opposite sex can kind of get the brunt of some of the confusion that can come from a divorce, particularly when the child's going through a puberty stage. So I hope that was helpful, Veronica. So we're going to move on to the next question here from Rachel. We have a bedtime routine, books, rocking, cuddling, but when it comes to actually going to bed, both kids will scream, cry, and refuse to go to bed, despite trying to reason with them why. Bedtime takes an hour and a half. How could I handle this to make bedtime a nice experience? Okay, well, that's a great question, Rachel. Well, you might, if it takes so long, you might even reduce some of the routines. I would take the rocking out of it, just because rocking can be a little bit overly soothing, and and I kind of tend away from some of the soothing methods. Because it can take children out of their feelings, and then when that soothing method is then taken away, then the feelings will arise and the resistance can come up. So I would try taking the rocking perhaps out of the routine, and then and see that might make a difference as well. And then maybe start to try and go to bed, schedule it a little bit earlier, and start to schedule and expect a long transition with the crying and whatnot. Sometimes children who have a buildup of stress and tension throughout the day will find that the nighttime and that transition to bedtime is the perfect opportunity for them to have a big cry and to kind of heal themselves. But again, this is not something we want to encourage, because we don't want the cycle to continue. So by using play attention time during the day, which opens the opportunity to go through, heal some of these feelings and emotions during the day, sometimes those can be resolved at night and they won't come out as much. So that's something else you can do, is just to try to approach and meet some of their needs for attention that they might be being met mostly at night, but maybe their need for attention, they feel it's still, it's just being met at night because they get a lot of affection and attention there, and they don't want it to end, they want it to carry on. So by, again, scheduling times in the day so that they get that same level of affection through the cuddling and the books and stuff, and other things that can meet their needs throughout the day, so that they become less desperate for it at night as well. So bedtimes are not easy, for any parent to go through, and oftentimes the more connected and attached approach we take to children, the more these feelings can come up at night. So it's not an easy thing to deal with, and it takes a lot of kind of balancing and trial and error and adjustments and stuff like that. And you'll see that some days, if your child had a lot of stress or tension, they just really need to have a good cry at night. So you might just plan to be there for them and deal with some of those cryings and stuff like that. The other thing too is just to try to keep those limits setting, right? To set those limits. So that if the child don't go to bed, so you turn off the light and you hear them talking, you want to try and to stop the talking right away, and you don't want to let it get out of hand and then come in and stop it after they've already been talking for 10 minutes. Just when you first hear it, you kind of want to come in and use connective communication, a loving limit, to let them know that it's really time to turn off the light and go to bed. So those are some things you can try, Rachel. So I hope that was helpful. So Lynn asks, please give a specific example of what to do when a child is not getting ready. For example, we have to get out the door and therefore can't wait their stubbornness out. Great question. So in that case, you want to kind of preempt that and get ready for that beforehand. If you see that they're not getting ready, you just want to give them verbal cues and really use that connective communication. Again, using those words, those magic words, those terms of endearments, can help to kind of break through any sense of disconnection or distraction that they might be experiencing if they're thinking about something else or doing something else. It can help to reach through that, to connect with them, to really kind of trigger them to respond to your request. Because if you start to, if you're getting stressed and tense about getting out through the door, and that's coming through your tone of voice, and you're telling them, okay, get ready, we have to get out the door, stop wasting time, you start getting critical in how you talk to your child, that will increase the tension, and the children will tend to freeze up more. So it actually is counterproductive. So the more that we can keep a connected, calm, soothing, loving tone of voice, the more our children will be responsive, because we're not triggering their stress responses and the fight or flight, which will cause them to freeze up and to become more reactive and less responsive. So I would just focus on using that connected communication and speaking very clearly, giving just clear guidance about what they need to do next. So, you can say, okay, you need to brush your teeth, sweetheart, and then tell them, okay, now it's time for you to get on your clothes, darling. Okay, let's go to the door, and just guiding them along. So using verbal cues, that can go a long way to get them out the door on time. All right. Arlene asks, rules with relationship leads to rebellion. Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. That's exactly what you've been talking about. Okay. Right, exactly, right? Rules without relationship leads to rebellion. That's exactly right. Because, we're social beings, and if we don't feel connected to the rules, if we don't feel like we have a relationship, like we have an emotional investment in them, if we can't see the reason why they're there, then we can just kind of sense that they're oppressive. And that they're being kind of forced onto us, and that will lead to rebellion. Thanks, Arlene. That's exactly right. Lynn asks, at what age of a child should you start discussing issues, behaviors, in family meetings? Okay, well, that depends upon the child. There's, each child develops at different rates, but I would tend towards, age 7.5 onwards is when you can start to talk a little bit more about intellectual concepts, and because that's when children become also a lot more receptive to their environment, a lot more open to learning from their environment. Previous to that, they're mostly just modeling behaviors and purely in a reactive state. And after that is when they start to question things and really to take in things and to weigh different approaches to things, or to weigh different information in their mind and to make decisions on that. But some children will be mature enough to start to talk these issues earlier. So, and again, we also have to consider what the issues are. Some issues are much more simpler to grasp, and others are more complex and have multiple layers and levels, which a younger child might have a hard time kind of talking about, or that kind of thing. The key here too is really holding the child accountable after the meetings. The older the child is, the more able they'll be to remember what was shared, and also to follow through on that with little or no prompting. Younger children, they might have a really hard time following through with what was said, because again, they're much more in the moment and much more responding to their own needs and to what's happening in the moment. So I would aim for around the 7-year mark, but again, it's all relative. Okay. So Kelly asks, what could we do to help our daughter be more respectful to those outside our home? I feel my husband and I are very good models when it comes to showing respect to our children and to others. So we're a bit frustrated when we continually find her being disrespectful for others, sometimes people she doesn't even know. She does have some anxiety issues, and so that may be playing into this as well. Okay, great. So that's a great awareness about the anxiety issues. So that's a sign that she might have some unresolved stress. Okay, so any anxiety issue has to do with the stress. So I would look at how to help her heal from her stress, and the different methods there that can do to work on that level to kind of get over some of the anxiety and that disconnect around relationships. So I'm assuming here just that she's a single child, and I'm not sure exactly how old she is. I'm going to just scroll up here because I know you asked a question earlier. Let's see, our little girl, yeah, here it is. Okay, so I'm not sure exactly how, 4. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, so she's 4 years old. All right, so she's still very young. Really, you can start to talk to her. At this age, you can kind of start to talk to her a little bit about speaking in nice ways, but don't hold her accountable too much to that. You can start to just kind of start to remind her and bring some of those thoughts into her awareness, but I would stay away from kind of holding her accountable or making the interaction too intellectual. It might just be sometimes children, their characteristics tend to be a little bit more abrasive. It's just kind of a personality trait, or sometimes single children as well. They'll have a harder time being more empathetic towards others, just because they're the whole world of the household usually, especially with very attentive, loving parents, which I'm sure you are because you're on this webinar, so you're very loving and attentive and trying to meet their needs. So sometimes with young children, they can kind of develop a little bit of a tendency of feeling like they're the center of the world. So it can be common where they might act in slightly disrespectful ways to others. So I wouldn't worry about it too much at this point. Just continue trying to be, we're focusing on being models of communication, especially how you communicate to others. And I wouldn't, a thing I would stay away from is really kind of scolding her in the moment if she is disrespectful to someone. I wouldn't bring that up. I wouldn't increase the tension around her interactions, because that's what that will do, especially with such a young girl. If she, if you're out and about and someone asks her how she is and she kind of, does something which is slightly disrespectful or rude, try to not increase the tension that is surrounding that interaction. Do your best to try to brush it off. If you can't, if she sticks her tongue out or does something that's blatantly rude, then you can bring that up. And but what I would do is to reach through to her. So, look her in the eyes, touch her, and say, "What's wrong, sweetie? How come you did that? This is just a nice person. Ask how you're doing." So you can also communicate in the moment a different perspective about the situation, so that she doesn't feel threatened or pressured, because maybe that's part of it. She feels like she's being threatened or pressured under those circumstances, so she's reacting to that, even though it might be completely self-created. So if you can communicate what's happening in ways where she feels that everything is good and everything is okay, then she'll start to relax a little bit more and be perhaps more open to engaging with other people and strangers. So again, I wouldn't worry about that too much. Just keep the conversation going. Keep giving her information about people and about interactions, and continually modeling that more loving behavior. I think that's probably your best approach, and that will likely shift over time as she kind of gets a bit older. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Okay, a question from Rachel. Riley, my 4-year-old, will absolutely refuse to pick up toys or pick up after himself and say, "You do it." If I would wait out his stubbornness, it would never get done. How can I get him to pick up his toys without it resulting in me doing it? He listens to his dad when it comes to this, but if he's not home, he gives me resistance. Okay, so I can see there that you're probably more permissive and the father is a bit more authoritarian. So what I would do there is just to try to find a way to engage him, into doing it. So, and you can also set up a limit around the next activity as well. So you can just indicate to him that you can't proceed to the next activity until he cleans up his things, right? So, and that can be any activity. And that means if you have lunch scheduled or something else, you can't do that till he cleans up his toys. And he might think, fine, I just won't eat lunch, so I'll go do something else. So that's where you need to step in and you need to say, "No, sweetie, you can't do something else either, because we need to finish this first. And I'll help you. So let's start. And then try to engage him, and you can start to help him, but really kind of try and get him to do it with you, and just kind of set that limit and do your best so that that limit never changes. And what you might an important part of this might be to start to plan ahead of time to initiate the cleaning or the end of play, say 10, 15 minutes before you would usually do it, so that you have time to work through that resistance, and to kind of wait out maybe some stubbornness, or to kind of cooperate with him or clean up, more slowly, while he's kind of humming along and kind of half doing things. Okay. The other thing I would look at too, again, is to look at the underlying reasons. Perhaps what are some of the reasons that he's acting like this. Maybe he feels a slight extra need for autonomy. That maybe so if you met this need in other ways, he might be more willing to do this during this time. So maybe during the playtime, if you could schedule a little bit of play attention time as well before this, then he can really feel connected to you as well. And another thing too is that don't shy away from tantrums and freakouts as well, because as I talk about in the child stress disorder webinar in the book Democratic Parenting, those can be great opportunities for healing. And oftentimes when we meet our child's stubbornness and we're kind of just engaged almost like in trying to really establish a firm limit that's something that must be done, and we don't allow our child to go to proceed to any other distraction or any other activity till we complete what needs to be completed in the moment, the child might meet this limit and start to push against it, and then that pushing might start to lead to like banging and hitting against it, and then that might lead to a big tantrum, a big freak out, which can be extremely healing if you help your child through that by giving them your full loving attention, letting them know that you're there, and of course making sure that they don't hurt themselves or anyone else if they're flailing or having a big tantrum. But those can be great healing ways to just let out and some intense feelings that might be behind some of the stubbornness or the resistance. Or that, because oftentimes the children, if their need for autonomy goes unmet for so long, that they just feel powerless in an adult-centered world and environment. And so when we tell them to do this and tell them to do that, it just increases that sense of that they're not in control and they're powerless and they just have to always go along with us. So they start to fight out against that. They try to meet their need for autonomy, that need to feel like they have choice and that they want to exercise their own personal power. They do that through the defiance. So, but if we can find ways to have that need for autonomy met in other areas, in other circumstances that work, that are a win-win for everyone, then you allow your child to play with their personal power, to become more responsible with their personal power, and then they'll be less defiant when they don't have to be, because that need for autonomy is being met at other stages in your daily life. So that's something that you can also look at as well, as that need for autonomy, and perhaps finding other opportunities in your day where they can feel a strong sense of autonomy, and that where they're exercising their power and they're the boss, and you're perhaps even following them. That's why play attention time is such a great technique, because by using the play attention time, and this technique is described in the book Democratic Parenting. There's a whole chapter on play attention time and how to do that. And so by using this, you actually kind of take the follower role and let the child be the leader in the play and in the interaction. And the children get an incredible amount of joy, and it meets so many of their needs for attention and connection, and most importantly for autonomy, because they get to really play with a sense of power, but in a safe environment, and a supported environment. And so that's something that I encourage you to also use with your child, Rachel. I think that'll help. Okay, from Darcy, question: how can I help my 11-year-old ADHD son when he's having a tantrum over doing things like going to baseball practice or a scheduled game? Okay, great question. So if he's having a big temper tantrum, that's an indication that there is some stress, some buildup of pressure and stress, and therefore a strong need for processing feelings and maybe experience there, or certain experiences and stimulation. And so what you'd want to do there is therefore kind of help them through that tantrum. Don't discourage them. Don't rush them to composure. So what you might try and do, if you know he's going to have a big tantrum before the baseball game, just plan to start to prepare to go well before, maybe a half an hour, maybe even 45 minutes before the normal departure time, so that there's enough time for him to have a big tantrum, and then he can still get to baseball in time, where he's more present at that point, where he's gone through the big temper tantrum. The other thing too is, is to just kind of open the floor to have a family meeting and open the floor to discussion about baseball, about extracurricular activities. And maybe in that discussion, you'll find out that, he really doesn't like baseball, and he'd be much happier not doing that at all. And that might be an opportunity for you to be a little bit more flexible and to find another extracurricular activity, or to do out with the extracurricular activity altogether, and just give him increased periods of unscheduled activity. We live in such busy times nowadays, and there's so much going on, and we kind of live in a culture that encourages do and accomplishment and gathering more and more skills. But the problem is that oftentimes children never have an opportunity to properly process all their experiences and all the skills that they learn. So they don't actually get to extract all the benefits from them, because there's just too much busyness, too much stimulation. And this can cause an incredible buildup of pressure and stress for children. And that can pour over into all kinds of problems like ADHD type symptoms, or tantrums and freakouts and these types of things. A big myth around ADHD is that children with these types of symptoms actually need activities so that they can focus their energy, that's behind some of the hyperactivity. It's not the case at all. Oftentimes, these children are overstimulated, and the best thing that we can do for them is to actually decrease some of the stimulation and increase the periods of unscheduled play, so they have more opportunity for doing what I call self-directed play, where they can process their experiences and just spend time alone processing, doing symbolic play activities, that type of thing, which can often go a lot farther in the long run to help them return to a state of clear attention and clear thinking and good judgment, and move away from some of the distractive type tendencies of their hyperactivity, that type of thing. So that's what I would say is to help your child work through those tantrums. Don't rush them through composure. Welcome temper tantrums, because those are extremely healing. And if you need more information on this, if you haven't heard about me talk about this before, I really encourage you to get my book, Democratic Parenting, and read those chapters on healing from stress, and also the setting limit chapter specifically on limiting tantrums, because there are some guidelines that are very helpful for helping children heal through tantrums. The important thing is we never want to leave a child to freak out or have a tantrum alone. We always want to be there. We need to ensure that they're safe, they don't hurt themselves or anybody else. And the important part is that we want them to feel connected, that we're there listening to them, that we're encouraging them to go through these emotions, and help them drain those feelings to completion. And that's the important thing to remember when dealing with a child who's expressing really strong emotions. These strong feelings bring up our own strong feelings. So what we want to do is to remember that all strong feelings have a beginning and an end. And if we can just stick it out with our children and listen to them through a temper tantrum, that tantrum will end as those feelings drain. And when those feelings drain, we can find that underneath all those strong feelings, underneath that stress, our child has a very clear awareness, has a calm attention, and is able to be very present with us. And their behavior shifts dramatically and incredibly before and after temper tantrums or big emotional releases. So these are things to be encouraged and to be assisted and helped when they have a temper tantrum. And again, engage them in a family meeting and open the floor to discussions around the schedule and around the activities. Because if he's 11 years old, he's at the stage now where he can start to take a little bit more responsibility and explore more of his own autonomy around some of his activities as well. That will go a long way into increasing his confidence as well. So I hope that was helpful, Darcy. Okay. All right. Emma says, thank you, Blaze. I enjoyed your webinar, and I'll try and join the next week's also. Thank you, Emma, and thank you, everybody, for coming on tonight's webinar. It was a real pleasure to spend this time with you, and I know if you've spent so much time listening to me and learning about these democratic parenting methods, then you're an amazing parent, and your child is very, very lucky to have you in their lives, guiding them towards their future. So every single day of your life, Give your child all your love, and give yourself that same love too, because we all need to fill our own cups if we want to fill our children's cups. And together, we truly can build a brighter future. Thank you. Good night.